This episode of Sovryn Tech is dedicated to Neil Peart. You weren't just a drummer, you were a god.
Power on.
Hey, if you have a project that needs reliable cryptocurrency data, check out blocktap.io. Blocktap.io is a universal cryptocurrency API. You can get historical prices for Bitcoin and other digital assets that you can use to build charts and do market analysis. Blockchain data is also indexed, so you can get transaction statistics, address balances, and more for Bitcoin and other networks. Blocktap.io is free for personal use, and you don't even need to create an account to access the API. To get started, try some of the example queries on the homepage at blocktap.io. Again, that's blocktap.io, blocktap.io, and we thank them for sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Woo! Let's get back to the show.
In the thinking of Buckminster Fuller, everything in the universe is related to everything else, and indeed, each one of us is a kind of miniature universe. The universe works itself out in billions of different ways, Fuller says, and you and I are just some of the ways in which it does that. Notice how often he comes back to love as a fundamental force in life. I don't know of any other scientist, any other genius of the practical, who is so insistent on the mysterious centrality of love in all of his experience. When he made that extraordinary connection between gravity and love, because neither casts a shadow, I found it pretty head-spinning. I'm not sure I've recovered yet from that one. In this final section now, he talks about the integrity of the universe, and he uses that word to mean the interrelatedness of everything to everything else. Well, more than that, it refers also to the way in which nature tolerates all of its realities, and that when we see conflicts, we're really just failing to see that design intelligence in the universe that keeps everything working in harmony with everything else. Interaccommodation is another one of Fuller's words for this integrity of universe. This last section is a good demonstration of the way in which he feels everything related to everything else in his own experience, like the unlikely connection between love and gravity. He's going to talk more about love and gravity. I'll ask him to discuss sexual love in that connection, and he'll begin with what first seems to be a detour into Henry Ford and mass production. But it's not a detour, it's really a characteristic concern to put everything into context. Integrity again. He begins by talking about what happens to this investigator who goes through life opening doors of experience and following the paths he sees before him. Does such a journey take the investigator any closer to knowing everything? Fuller says no. It's the opposite.
Fundamentally, in every way, we just simply find the great mystery increasing. But as the verities are disclosed to us, as the curtain is pulled aside, it is always to disclose increasing integrity.
Increasing integrity?
Yeah. Not but more of the integrity. Integrity could not be increased. Yeah. Integrity is integrity.
It discloses more of the integrity.
More of the integrity is manifest.
Does it also not disclose more mystery?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's come back to love, then. And love, I hear you saying, is essentially mysterious and partakes of that same metaphysical.
I think it is a great metaphysical gravity. I mean, the greater integrity, because gravity is very fantastic, and it's very fantastic that that's the gravity goes to work like that so quickly. Mm-hmm. But it's much more important that you find this love. I can't see that, Paul, but there is a beautiful thing. We feel it all the time. We're so afraid of being exploited, or humanity, poor darling little innocent humanity, so scared of getting caught soft, it doesn't like to admit it. It feels that love all the time.
Now, what about that other feeling that is commonly called love?
Called what?
Love, namely sexuality.
Yeah.
Where does that intersect? Sexuality seems to me, in your metaphor, to be much more of a direct line.
Well, I said the effect of one another on each other is we all go into orbit.
Yeah.
But every once in a while we get into what they call critical proximity, and one falls in on the other. Now, This critical proximity is a very rare matter. You and I are living where this does go on here, so we're terribly aware of it because we're in the critical proximity area. When Henry Ford began to get into mass production of parts for automobiles, he had to be interchangeable parts, and he had therefore to have very little, he should have little tolerance for error, or they wouldn't be interchangeable. So in designing and engineering, you have how much error can you tolerate, and the less error there is, the more efficient it is, and less energy wasted in frictions, etc., and less repair. He was, in order then to get into inside and outside dimensionings and so forth, and the spaces between things, there were very extraordinary, the calipers measuring outside and gauge knife distances between two. There were extraordinary Scandinavians, Johansen, developed the Johansen gauges, gauge blocks, where they're really considerable distances, not just a little leaf distance apart. But they had to be absolutely accurate distances apart. And the Johansen developed by far the most accurate gauges known at the time of old Henry Ford. They were so beautifully machined, their surfaces, that if you took two Johansen gauge blocks and put them together, the space between them was less than a molecule of atmosphere, of the gaseous atmosphere. Therefore, a molecule could not come in between the two, therefore you couldn't pull them apart. There was nothing to go in to fill. You could only slide them apart. But if you didn't slide them apart, very soon they would not move. Why? Because they got where the atoms were literally in critical proximity, and they would then literally coalesce and became pure metal again.
Literally? Wow.
I would see that this critical proximity thing is a very, very delicate matter, and that is only the thickness of that thin paper mass out from our Earth where you no longer are falling into anything. That's an awfully short distance, 100 miles, and the next nearest star, 92 million miles. The next nearest star is I think, 6.5 trillion miles away. So we're 99.9999999% of all the universe, you don't fall into anything. So falling in is something very extraordinary. So you talk about the sexual one. If it really is something you call really a falling in love, independent of what we would call then the metaphysical embracement and tolerance of all, I would call that, that's what you get when setting in orbit, you then what you call critical proximity.
I don't believe that you believe that it's quite that mechanical.
I'm talking about the pull. I'm talking about the attraction. That's all I'm talking about.
On orbiting, another detail that we went
because a lot of people are orbiting by, and you say, very beautiful. But there's really quite some difference when there's suddenly something lights up between people and there's a pull.
Yeah.
Accessing historical database. Year 2020. The tech giants become aware of the greatest threat to their corporatist domination. An obscure science and tech podcast becomes a major factor in a peaceful open source revolt against the military Silicon Valley industrial complex. The podcast, Sovryn Tech. Its host, Dr. Brian Sovryn. The tech giants tried to stop Sovryn Tech. They can't.
Woo, the man of tomorrow is here, and it is hot. And I don't just mean that Ice Planet Zero really doesn't look like Ice Planet Zero right now. I mean, it is over 60 degrees. It has been all weekend it's January in New Hampshire. What in the goddamn hell? Not only for that reason, though, is it hot. It's hot because I am not alone. I am being joined by, well, the things I could say. But I'm being joined by the one and only Ellen Stallone. Woo! Yeah, there it is. There's a little woo from Ellen.
Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, well, we said last week when we recorded, got a lot of great response from that show. Of course, everybody loves when you're on because you're fucking
thank
brilliant.
you.
Yeah. And I had said, it was like, we had stories we wanted to get into, but we ended up talking about some other stuff and going down, all kinds of tributaries of thought that it's like, well, we got to have you on because we still got to talk about these things because I think there's things to discuss as far as they go. But before we get into that, and I know you always love being on, and I appreciate you always coming on. Yeah. I mean, you've been a fan forever, and, now we're, well, anyway.
Well, it's so much fun just to be able to have these conversations with you.
Yeah. I mean, these are kind of the conversations we have all the time, right? Of course, because we spend basically every moment that we can together.
Right. But now your listeners can interact with us while we're having these conversations.
Yeah, they get in on it. And I mean, it's always great to have such, I mean, I tell you, folks, the one thing in life, because I think we're going to get into talking about happiness a little later on, and you're going to say, what does that have to do with tech? Don't you worry. All right. But the one thing in life, that can really, really make you happy is when you have somebody, that you can just talk to. It's not, and about anything. And I mean literally anything, no judgment. You just say it and you go and you just understand and extrapolate with each other and all. None of the clever bullshit. What's the Billy Joel line? I don't want clever conversation.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to have to work that hard.
Yeah.
I just want someone that I can talk to.
Exactly. Right. There's a good Billy Joel line right there.
And it's funny. You have this line where sometimes you'll ask me, can I tell you about something stupid? And I'm like, of course you can. I want to hear everything. Whether you think it's stupid, let me decide if it's stupid. Please. I want to hear it.
I appreciate
just that it's coming from you. And that you want to engage with me, I find that really exciting and fulfilling, and that's the basis of our friendship.
Yeah, well, and our love. I mean, and I couldn't be that in love if I didn't have that. As we are with each other, if you don't mind me saying that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, but I mean, you got to understand how rare that is. Because for a lot of people, you start talking about something that they just think is. I don't know, whatever. I could be talking about Thundercats or something. I mean, who cares? And for other, for some people, they're like, well, what the hell does that matter? Are you making money? And it's like, whoa,
Not everything's about money.
Whoa, dangerous words, dangerous words, and a preview perhaps of what we're going to discuss later on in the show. But wow, you just, I don't know, I think half my audience just turned off when you said that.
I think it's important for everyone to have someone that they can talk to about anything, regardless of whether it's stupid or the most elevated philosophical idea that you could possibly think of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, something that isn't stupid. In fact, we watched this last night. We talked about it last week when we were on, because we reviewed the movie Aniara. And we've got another movie review to get in at the end of the show. Again, we got tech stuff to get into, folks. In fact, we got something I want to talk to people about that Ellen and I experienced that was a little disturbing, quite frankly. That has to do with none other than Amazon, which, I mean, Amazon and disturbing are really synonymous these days. But we watched Europa Report, which I reviewed when it first, I don't know if it was when it was first released, but I want to say I reviewed that back in 2013. And I thought that this was such a rare, special movie because it's hard science fiction. There's no, and really there's not much in the way of action whatsoever, nor do I need there to be. And just a beautiful, beautiful film. I don't remember what I gave it back in the day. I could give it a 10 out of 10, at least a 9 out of 10. But I mean, I could certainly go higher. But after watching Aniara, I said, boy, you got to see Europa Report. And, got my hands on it, and we actually ended up watching it. I mean, what did you think of Europa Report?
Well, I mean, as far as hard science fiction goes, I feel like it was a perfect movie.
Right.
I would say 10 out of 10.
Yeah, there you go. No, it really is. I mean, and it's so well done because it has that, unique kind of a documentary style to it. And it does really cool things with... I mean, it's a movie that basically has a UI. like, or a UX, a user experience, based off of user interface. And it is so poignant. I mean, and it's all about the ending. Would you say that's true?
Well, I mean, the story is built up as the movie goes on, but the ending it really does redeem whatever sad, distressing things happen in the movie.
Right. I mean, it's a slow film, like it's a bit, I don't know, plotting is usually derogatory. I don't think it's derogatory in this sense, but it's a very slow film. But I mean, just to me, it's amazing how subdued it is, but yet, I don't know, when you saw the ending, and we won't give it away, but when you see the end, I mean, I just feel like this, almost a euphoria, like, and just pure excitement of basically of what gets discovered, because the movie's about a mission to Europa, and it's really something. I mean, how did you feel, like when you finally get that ending?
Well, I wanted to say that I felt that like euphoric sense of exploration and achievement like all throughout the movie.
Sure.
Because this mission is going farther out in space than any other human mission has gone before. So already they're making new discoveries as they go along.
Yes, right, good point.
From the moment that they take off, or they fly past the moon all the way until the landing on Europa itself, and even like the small discoveries that they make before the final reveal. So that's all really exciting, and I think that it wasn't exactly, I wouldn't say that it was like slow and plodding. It was subdued, but it was more like the subdued, like quiet, controlled excitement of scientists on this vessel. Like, you can tell that they really want to do the best they can and like push the discovery further. But I guess it's not like the boom boom explosion like action film that most people are used to today.
Oh, especially today. I mean, and frankly, I think anybody that, like, this is one case where, trust me, and I'm sure Ellen would say the same, like, trust you, this is a movie worth watching. Would you recommend this to pretty much anybody? Certainly Sovryn Tech's audience, I would say.
I would. And like, the ending is, well, it's definitely worth the watch.
Yeah, the juice is worth the squeeze on this. But I recommend watching it because I think it'll stand in such stark contrast to every other movie that comes out in the past 10 years, at least. And I think you will walk away from this movie going, fuck, why don't we make movies like this anymore? Because movies used to get made like this. 2010, even, I mean, you think of 2001, Star Trek the Motion Picture, Moon. I mean, there's a ton of these films that are very, very procedural, very, again, that hard science fiction. It's not all boom, 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 fuck the Guardians of the Galaxy, whatever. I mean, yeah.
Well, what's really unique about this film is that everything that happens in it is possibly real. It could possibly happen.
Yeah, it's plausible.
It's just, exactly. There's nothing that happens that's like interdimensional or magical or, it's just, it's based on real science, and people are just like projecting, well, what if?
Yeah.
What if we went to some other place in space and found something unexpected?
Yeah, and I like that more than, did you ever see, and it's okay if you didn't, and I don't know if we'd watch it, because I don't think I could watch this movie again. Did you see Interstellar? Did you?
I did see that, yeah.
Okay. Did you like it? And it's fine if you did.
I liked the creativity of it. I liked the really far out nature of it. Not that I, like, really buy into the science.
Right.
But I did enjoy it as a film.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Interstellar's kind of in this vein, but it's just, I don't know. It just goes into really strange places.
Yeah.
And places that just aren't necessary. I know
it's reaching beyond known science.
Right. And this is it. I mean, I get it. They were trying to really. I feel like they're trying to make a modern 2001 with that, in a very real way. But I don't know. I like it a little more straight to head. Even though there might be things out in the universe that we would experience that are just so unbelievable, and beyond our notions of what is logical. Like, I could really believe that's so. Give me these movies that really, what's the word I'm looking for? That really edify, like, that sense of exploration and getting out there. And I don't feel like Interstellar really achieved that. I don't know so much that even 2001 achieved that, even though it did make space travel look very realistic. But some of these other films, I feel like they do a good job of that, and they really want to make you get out there. And this is one of the ones that really did that.
Yeah, well, maybe part of the reason that this movie is so satisfying is because it functions based off of known science, and you're basically just taking something that you know exists here on Earth and putting it on a different planet. Mm-hmm. And that's it's like, or like, it's functioning based off of things you already know, whereas I feel like Interstellar, it really took a leap in logic and took these concepts that are really highly theoretical and put them into a movie. Whereas we know, like, life isn't theoretical. It's a real thing. Yeah, and I think there's so much to do, so much to explore within space, even in fiction, without having to go to those theoretical extremes. If I can put it that way. I mean, I can what's the band Angel and Airwaves? I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they made a movie, kind of a concept movie around an album, and it was called Love, and it's kind of like Interstellar, very similar. In fact, we'll have to watch that sometime, because I did enjoy that. I mean, I can appreciate that, but boy, it just feels good to something where you dive right in and you get it, and we're in space and doing the business, and I'll tell you, I think that's something we really need right now. It honestly looked so much like a NASA space launch. Like the beginning of the movie. It looked like a real space launch. Yeah, absolutely. Very realistic all the way around. And you know what else I think it gives? It gives this, and because Waterworld, I think, is kind of an antithesis to this in a way. It is one of those rare movies that makes you feel good to be a human being. You watch it and you're just like, yeah, God damn it. They really put the best humans on that space mission. Absolutely. But at least to even, for the humans to do it, because, and I say this, understand I am a comic book, as in the actual comic books, not the movies. I'm a comic book fan. But, like, we're so inundated with the fantastical and with, like, these, superheroes constantly saving the day in movies. It's really great to just have everyday people doing the most extraordinary things. And it's not even like supernatural extraordinary. No. It's just they feel their fear, but they don't let their fear stop them from doing what they know they want to do. Yeah, an old Sovryn text saying, and it's not even really a Sovryn text saying. A lot of people have said it. Feel the fear, do it anyway. And that is a way to engage life all the time. And that's an awesome part of it too, is they keep running into all these situations, and they just keep doing their job. Like they don't stop even. Well, anyway, that is extraordinary. Yeah, it's a beautiful film, something worthwhile watching. And anything else you want to say on your Roper report? Are we doing a full review right now? No, we're just kind of talking about it, but it kind of leads into, because it's a feel good. In my opinion, it's a very feel good movie, even though you usually don't say that about hard science fiction. But we really, before we get into our stories this week, we had kind of a tragedy that happened this week, actually just a couple days ago when this gets released. We lost, and I know you're a huge fan, Ellen. This is one of the first things we really connected on. We lost, literally, and I say this because people say this kind of shit all the time, right? Like, who's the greatest guitarist? Who's the greatest this? Blah, blah, who's the greatest singer? Blah, blah, blah. People talk this stuff all the time. No, this is one where I think unanimously everybody just fucking knows it, and if it's because they're, air drumming Tom Sawyer or what, I don't know. But we lost Neil Peart, the single greatest drummer in fucking history. Just straight up, and I would argue we're never going to have no one's ever going to be able to match that, because Neil Peart graced us, and I mean that. Rush in general, Geddy Lee, all of them. I mean, what a three-piece band, right? but they graced us at a time when you could be just a drummer, and I don't say that with disrespect. You could be just a drummer and make millions of dollars a year. Like, that's not possible today. If you're a musician today, you have to run your own YouTube channel, you have to do all this horse shit, and you're probably not, you can't just be a drummer and be the absolute best of your craft and make millions of dollars. That's just not how the music industry works anymore, for bad or good. But he died of brain cancer. We know that. And apparently he was wrestling with it for quite a few years. I had heard on the Eddie Trunk show over the past few years that basically Rush was done. Whether or not they knew it was because of
because of Neil Peart's health or what. I don't, I'm not really clear on that. But what a loss. You and I have been going to a lot of concerts lately. And unfortunately, this is one of the ones where it would be just a no-brainer to go see
Oh,
Rush.
absolutely.
Yeah. And now, so sad, that we don't get the opportunity.
Yeah, we'll never see them live. And it's such a loss to humanity. I mean, when you have someone that talented,
Yeah.
you'll just never get it back.
Yeah. No, I mean
at least their music lives on through recordings, but still, that's, when you go to a concert and you see someone actually banging on the drums, that's just so revitalizing.
Oh, sure. I mean, and we've seen some tremendous drummers.
Yeah.
Just in the past, I guess, about a year or so. I mean, when we went to go see Whitesnake, and Tommy Aldridge just like tosses his drumsticks away, starts bashing on the skins with his fists. I mean, like a drum solo. Yeah, in fact,
him and Phil Collins and Dream Theater.
Yeah.
Like, such amazing drummers.
Yeah, it's remarkable. In fact, I think Eddie Trunk said this on Twitter when, after the news was announced, that nobody, when Neil Peart was doing a drum solo, nobody went to go get a beer. Because that's a common thing, is that when the drum solo's on, everybody goes and gets a beer, or if the band's playing a new song, they go and get a beer. Of course, not us.
No.
But we don't do that. But I get his point that, no, when Neil Peart, I mean, that was a show when Neil Peart was doing that. Yeah, I mean, it's just tragic. And it bolsters the point that we've been feeling like, look, we got to see these people while they're still around, because
they're not going to live forever.
No, and I forget how old he was, pushing 70, or if not in his 70s. I forget the exact age that Neil Peart was at.
I remember when you told me, I was like, wow, that's surprisingly young.
Yeah, it was like 67, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's what it was. So, I mean, real quick, again, we're going to get into the tech news, but real quick, I mean, what does like Rush mean to you? I mean, or do you have a favorite album, favorite song?
Wow.
I know that's a tough call.
That's just, there's so much music that Rush has made that really speaks to me because, I mean, notoriously, Geddy Lee is an introvert, right? He doesn't like fame. He even made a whole song about it, Yeah. But some of Rush's music, it just has these, like, great expanses of instrumental, and it's... there's something about it that's, like, so cerebral, and it's, like, really rebellious music, too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't possibly come up with, like, a favorite song, because a lot of their albums are basically, I mean, they're entire songs in themselves, like the whole album is. Like 2112.
Yeah.
Holy fuck. I mean, I'd easily say that's my favorite album. Of course, that album was also dedicated to Ayn Rand. I mean, like, they were on, the individualism train. I mean, they
Totally.
and I think lyrically, that's a rare thing we get too, is lyrically for a band to be so on point. I think with where we're at, you and I. Yeah, I mean, just to, yeah, there's no way. I mean, like I said, I could say 2112 is my favorite album. I couldn't pick a favorite song. I mean, the corollary is like, like, who do you think is like the successor to Rush? Would you say like Dream Theater or something like that?
Possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one I'd have to give more thought to, but I mean, Dream Theater is not going to make it as big as Rush did.
No.
But
yeah.
they are in a similar vein of music.
Yeah, it's that prog rock. I mean, that's just phenomenal. But yeah, basically, I mean, but it brings up the point, we really don't have, like, there is no other Rush, and I don't even think Dream Theater would go to say that, that they were anything even close. But I mean, prog rock is still a thing. There's still people out there doing it, but man, we lost the best. I mean that you can't replace Geddy Lee's voice either. I mean,
no.
that voice is just so unique. It's an irreplaceable band, and Neil Peart, irreplaceable drummer. It's really, yeah. I mean, it's that music that really speaks to to you intellectually, and a lot of people don't think about that when an electric guitar comes on, but oh baby, is it,
Yeah.
What do you got?
Oh, I was just thinking, like, one of my favorite songs by Rush is it's the song about the trees. Where he's singing about the forest and the maples and the oaks. There's a drum solo in that somehow is like really fitting. Like I just imagine like a forest in turmoil.
Yeah.
Playing, you know.
Right.
It's that's the real art, is like painting that picture with sound.
Yeah. 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 It's such a shame, and I mean, even, you know, part of the problem is that. Yeah, I don't feel like there is anybody to replace any of these guys, any of these bands. Not really, you know, and
Well, I mean, no one will ever be the same, and that's kind of the beauty of individualism. But yeah, it also is really a loss, and
I mean, we'll always have their albums, right?
exactly.
That's great, but at the same time, it's just
There's so many songs they could have made.
yeah, and just what a shame that there's it really. I mean, I know there's great bands out there. I'm not saying there aren't great bands out there, but there's just no one else to really carry the torch, you know, like some of these bands. Like, I'm, you know, terrified of the day when somebody from Judas Priest really dies. They, like, you know, Rob Halford or whoever. I mean, or any of this stuff, because it's like, oh shit, you know, like, because there's just no one to pick it up and run with it. And believe me, I listen to all the new bands, you know, and I even get Ellen to listen to them at the gym, but it's just none of it's the same, and so yeah, this is going to keep happening, and I hate it, you know, that and 67, boy, you're right, that does seem so young, doesn't it, especially for a rock and roller, you know.
Yeah, well, for someone in that line of work, I feel like that's old. But
yeah, to a degree, yeah.
I'm not entirely sure what's old and what's young. I always feel like death is a tragedy, no matter what age.
Sure. Well, I mean, you think of like Alice Cooper. Like, that guy's got to be pushing 80, you know, and we saw him. And,
yeah, it's incredible.
And he was still out there killing it, you know. So, yeah, that's why even 67 seems crazy, you know. Well, anyway, anything else you want to add in about Neil Peart?
I don't know what to say. I just, you know, he'll be missed.
Yeah, definite loss of absolutely one of the best. I mean, people, you can use the term or the phrase "the best" all you want, but this is just a fact of life. This guy, just the greatest drummer ever, bar none. And even, you know, you think of all the other, you know, Tommy Lee, hell, even Tommy Aldridge, like we mentioned, Peter Criss, go down the list of them, every single one. Hell, even Mike Portnoy, originally from Dream Theater, would even say, yeah, no, Neil Peart's the you know, the best we've got. Like, we're all just kind of, you know, basking in his shadow, and that's just how it is. So anyway, speaking of a looming shadow, perhaps. We had a hell of an interesting experience, and folks, if you're wondering, you might hear some creaky chairs, and you might hear some, because we have I have my USB microphone set up, so you might not get the usual creamy sound that Sovryn Tech is known for right now. But regardless, we got to see about updating the microphones.
Well, it's just the price you pay for having a guest on the show.
That's true. And having a nice, easy setup that can work pretty much anywhere, and that's kind of important for me. You know, you got to be ready to go at a moment's notice.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, maybe someday we'll have a more full studio with like separate microphones and like standing desk setup or something.
Yeah. We'll do the whole thing. I mean, we'll
eventually.
Yeah, we'll get it there. So, but for right now, anyway, where I might not get that equipment from because this is pretty disturbing, is Amazon. So I ordered, what did I think I ordered a hat and some protein powder. I think that's what I was getting. Okay. And I don't know, I ordered this, I guess, Thursday, this past Thursday, or no, what day was it? Was it Friday when it came in?
I don't remember.
Oh, no, it was earlier this week because I talked about it.
You order packages every day.
No, you're right. So I talked about this on the Wednesday Q&A. But you got to be a member of the Zombie One Underground to hear about this. But I want to let everybody know about this because I was like, holy shit. But go to zombie1.com. That's ZOMIAONE.com. And you can sign up there and get your hookup, and you get access to thousands of hours of original content, and new content comes out every single week. So I was talking about it on there because it was happening as I was recording. I was getting this order in from Amazon, okay? And suddenly I get a notification that, because, you know, I have the Amazon app on one of my phones here, and I get this notification that your package is 9 stops away. I'm like, wow, that's new. 9 stops away? What the hell does that even mean? And like, where are they getting this data from?
Well, we were guessing it was because Amazon has its own fleet of delivery trucks now.
Right. So now, I mean, you get notifications all the time, be it SMS, however you have it set up, that, oh, your package will be delivered today by such and such a time. Well, not only that, but it was giving me, like, usually it'll say by 8 p.m., which basically means anytime that the UPS or USPS shows up, you could basically have it. But this is being very specific with this package for some reason. It was saying between the hours of 1 and 5 p.m. that you would receive this, okay? And I'm like, wow, that's really weird. But then, that notification comes up, so many stops, it's like, look at the map to see where it's at. And I'm like, what? And so I'm clicking on this. And then the Amazon app opens up, and there it is. It's telling me the amount of stops, the time, the estimated time. I am watching on a map, and it's important to note that it's Here Maps, not Google Maps or anything like that, which is interesting that Amazon would want to use Here Maps. Which we talked about that on Dark Android episodes years ago on Sovryn Tech. But anyway, and I did a little more of a breakdown of that on the Zomi 1 content if you want to hear about that. But you could literally track where this, where this truck was going. And I'm like, did they do this deal with UPS? I can't believe UPS is allowing for this, but you're right. Basically, we realized that, and it would keep, ticking it down. It's like, oh, it's 5 stops away, 4 stops away, or whatever. But I think you're right. It ended up being, and I think I mentioned this either on previous Q&As or I mentioned it on a Sovryn Tech episode, but Amazon does have their own fleet of delivery trucks now. They're just Prime trucks, and they're like a dark blue, and they have the Prime symbol on the side, and they're driving around. And they drop this thing off, and I get an email when it gets dropped off saying, hey, your package has been delivered, blah, blah, blah. And I open up the email, and they not only dropped off the package, they took a picture of the package at our front door, and you could see right into the house, right? And like I could see my NWO shoes and everything. Like, I mean, it was like, whoa, like who the hell told you could take a picture? Like where in the privacy settings of Amazon did I give you permission to take a fucking picture of the front of my house? But that's exactly what they did. They dropped it off, and I guess, they went on their way. From a business standpoint, and I talked about this on the Q&A, from a business standpoint, I can understand why they do this, right? Because they want to verify to you that the package was delivered, because you have a lot of people, frankly, who are probably scamming them saying, oh, the package was stolen, I never received it, especially around Christmas time. So I understand where, even without privacy implications, that Amazon would be interested in doing this. But I mean, when I was showing it to you and everything, like your jaw just dropped. You're like, whoa, what terrified. The hell were they doing? I mean, yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell it was our front porch because there's a chair we have on the porch. It was there. Like, our front door is basically like a giant glass plate, so you can see inside and I just, like, anybody could walk up to our front door and look inside and see basically the entryway. Mm-hmm. So I get it. It's not much different than taking a picture, but what freaks me out is Amazon has this picture, and what is Amazon doing with it? Like, right. Is this being stored somewhere? I don't know. I mean, like, and the weirdest thing would be if they, like, connected the picture to the stop location, like the GPS coordinates, mm-hmm. and then, like, anybody could have that information who works at Amazon.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm just, like, going to, like, worst case scenario in my mind with this.
Yeah, no, and I hear that. And I think that, of course, in fact, last week we talked about the Ring video camera and the bullshit right. that it was doing in that bedroom? Okay. Like, I predicted that Amazon buying Ring, because originally Ring was it was the Ring video doorbell. Okay, so it was a video camera that you put at your door. Like on your doorknob, or like just under your doorknob or whatever. Okay. Like, I get that. And I understood why Amazon bought that, because that would be a way for, hey, we can use this information that when you purchase the Ring video doorbell, to verify that your package was delivered and so on. And there was a certain synergy with Amazon and Ring working together in that way to verify your packages there, to make sure nobody was stealing it even, because the camera, the Ring video doorbell, was always running, right? But with that, I feel like, okay, you're buying the Ring video doorbell. You're already, first off, that's outward facing. Second off, you're already, basically giving permission to, okay, you can see what's in front of my house. or you can see the front of my house with this. But with this, I don't know where I signed up, again, for Amazon to take pictures of the front of my house.
Maybe it was in that super long agreement that you just like click next on.
I imagine so, because you can't use Amazon if you don't click next, right? That's the old-fashioned, that's the old argument. Yeah.
They throw like 20 pages of text at you, and all you can do is click I agree, because if you don't, then you can't use it.
Yeah, and I'm not seeing many people making a real stink about this. Now, granted, I can imagine in a big city, that this is a very real problem, and there are people who are probably in apartment buildings, again, where there probably already are cameras and all this stuff, where they could find this very useful and also not find it strange. But, frankly, you and I, Ellen, we often fantasize just getting away, and literally going to West Bumfuck. We're already in New Hampshire, but
But there are places more isolated.
Yeah, exactly. And I got to tell you, if this is the order of the day, I am not going to order a goddamn thing on Amazon. If I'm trying to get away from civilization, and all this shit, I don't want anybody taking pictures of the front of my house, and something about it was really off and creepy. Does it surprise me? Not in the slightest. Are there reasons beyond privacy concerns or anything that make perfect business sense? Yes, but that doesn't mean I like it. And that doesn't mean it can't be used for, again, there could be problems.
So, what problems do you foresee with this?
Overall, there's a certain invasion of privacy. Also, when you have a house that, say, where the doors are all glass or something like that, because you want the sun to come in, maybe you actually have some greenery around and all these things. Who knows what these guys could take a picture of, and that picture gets kept, on servers or whatever. Also, ultimately, I don't think it really, because there's nothing, okay, so he took a picture when he got there and it was there. That doesn't stop anybody from stealing it 10 minutes later, from stealing your package. So at the same time, I get it, but I don't think it really solves anything other than it verifies to the user that the package was delivered. But then this should be, it speaks to, I guess my real problem with it is that it speaks to an overall lack of concern for privacy, and that we just let this stuff kind of happen. Not only that, companies expect you to want it, and because the default should be that this is something you turn on. When Amazon's going to deliver it, hey, would you like to, a message should come up. And frankly, in a perfect world, it should come up every time you place an order. Would you like, it's just like asking for a signature, right? When the post office drops something off to you. Would you like a picture taken verifying that this was delivered? And you can say yes or no. But no, Amazon just said, no, we're just going to take pictures of the fucking front of your house, and here you go. And that speaks to an abstract attitude that frankly bothers the fuck out of me, and that points at all kinds of problems, of course, which we talk about every week on this show, it seems like. But, anything else you got to say on this?
Yeah, I guess that bothered me a lot too, was that it felt so, I don't want to say violating, but it really did seem kind of careless in that sense. There is a lack of care about the inside of our, it was a low down picture, so you couldn't see too much inside of the house, but still imagine if you had a kid and they were playing at the park, and somebody just comes up and starts taking pictures of them because they're in a public visible place. Right. There's something about that to me that just seems a little uncomfortable. You should be asking for consent when you do something like that.
Oh, I agree completely. Absolutely. Oh man, boy, this speaks to a big thing. When video cameras, basically when mini DV came out, which was a miniature version of VHS tape, okay, and so camcorders, home camcorders that the everyday person would have, when they got to palm size, okay, you had a lot of people going around recording stuff and constantly being fucking pranksters. And I remember this is just, well, I guess now it's almost 20 years ago, which that's hard to believe, but we'll say 15, just to be a little gracious about it. I remember some they weren't kids, they were teenagers, maybe college kids or something like that, like going around and just being kind of prankish with this and like just video recording like people in their cars and all this stuff. And, at the time I wasn't as peaceful a person as I am now. And I wanted to get out of my car and, grab their camera and smash it in half, say like, whoa, what the hell are you doing? Like when did I agree to, to allow this to happen? And one person, like 3 cars down, did get out of their car and like started saying, give me the fucking tape. Like, I mean, they got right in their face about it, what they were doing. What happened to that attitude? I say this, I over the 8 years of Sovereign Tech, I've been saying this almost, for many episodes. What happened to us? We used to give a shit about this. Like, we used to not want this. This used to be considered invasive. This used to be considered, like, rude to just take a picture of someone, but that's not the case anymore. I mean, and it's funny too, because you have, like Daisy Ridley. In fact, I read this, when I was reading some interview by her during the Rise of Skywalker campaigns and everything. And Daisy Ridley came out and she had to tell her friends, hey, if you take a picture of us, don't fucking share it. Like, and in fact, if you don't mind, ask me before you take the picture and all this, because her life is potentially on the line. And that's just from, crazy fans, and believe me, Star Wars fans are that fucking nuts. We've certainly had that proven. Hello, Reylo. We won't get into that conversation.
Oh, God.
Ellen had a hell of a time going down the rabbit hole of Reylo. But
Yeah, I was just learning about this yesterday, and I almost regretted learning about it.
Oh, it's scary as fuck. These people are insane. So I totally understand where Daisy Ridley is coming from. But that's the thing. One day, you could out of nowhere, when Daisy Ridley got cast into Star Wars, into The Force Awakens, her life changed overnight. She was instantaneously a household name. And now all the actions she took and all of the privacy invading affairs that happened, or matters or pictures or whatever that happened over the years, suddenly became, very interesting information for crazy people. And that's the overall concern, is that, I think at some point any of us overnight could suddenly become a target for whatever reason, because we already have plenty of crazy people. They're called the government, and they're always looking, you know what I mean? But it could even be, doesn't have to be the government. It could even be just whatever stalkers of any kind. And there's plenty of them. I mean, I'm terrified of that. Like, you just look on the internet, like, you could say people don't act the same they do offline as they do online, and I think there's some truth to that. But these people are insane. Like, I mean, so many people online are just fucking nuts. In fact, I'm not going to get into the conversation here, but I basically, like, canceled every streaming service I have, and I said, like, I'm not even going to go to theaters anymore to go see a new movie. I might go see an old one, but I'm not going to go see a new movie, for anything, because the entertainment industry seems to just be eating this up, of turning these people into fanatics and zealots, and it's deplorable. So those are the concerns, is that any and all data collected about you eventually can and will be used against you, right? That's the old Sovereign Tech saying on that, on data. And that includes the picture that the fucking Amazon guy takes. So anyway, I know I just went on a major diatribe, Ellen. I mean, do you have anything to share on that?
That answers my question, and I guess that's kind of my concern too, is like, what if Amazon takes a picture of our front door and they, like, in the picture there's like a pair of shoes, like some brand of shoes, and then they start like marketing or advertising those to us.
Oh, that's another good one. Yeah.
But like, that information is like, it's in their database.
Right.
And who knows what that's being used for or could be used for in the future.
Yeah, and that's fucking invasive. I mean, imagine that they take a picture of the front of your house. Next thing you know, you're getting recommendations across the internet, not just on Amazon, but across the internet for you need doormats, or you need new doormats and all this stuff. And I mean, when you could say, well, actually that's very useful, but then, like, did you fucking ask them to tell you that? And not even that. Like, how is that not invasive? Like, how is that not crossing a line? I dare say crossing a threshold. Woo!
Well, I guess I just wonder, how would people feel if somebody walked up to their house and was snapping photos of their house, like up close and personal photos?
Right.
If they didn't work for Amazon, if it was just some random person.
Yeah.
Like, how would you respond to that?
Right. And let's be clear here. Those Amazon employees, I mean, go online. You want to read some scary stories, just read about how disgruntled they fucking are, And I mean, they're just normal people. and they shouldn't really be seen as anything other than that.
But they work for a giant evil corporation,
which should make the matter worse, right? I mean, like then it's just doubling down on the madness because I hear you. Like, how would you feel if some random person's just you'd be like, hey, whoa, what the fuck are you doing? Right. And the fact that the Amazon employee has a giant evil mega corporation behind it, which it does, should be even worse. We've gone astray. we've very much gone astray. I don't like it.
Well, cameras are ubiquitous at this point. They're just everywhere.
As are
Everyone has
microphones
them.
and everything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe people are just completely desensitized at this point.
That's really sad. That's really, really sad.
Well, not everyone is. I mean, there are movements of people that are trying to live like pre-Victorian lives, but
That's true.
They're few and far between.
Yeah. Boy, I have so much I want to say on this, but I know we got other stories to get into. We've already gone 40 minutes, and I want to get into these stories. I want to talk about it, and we want to review Waterworld. Unless what's going to end up happening is we're going to have Ellen on next week again. Oh. But how terrible
what
that
a tragedy.
would be. Oh, jeez, that would be the worst. But no. Well, all right, before we get into the next story, let's get in a little something that pays the bills. So, one way perhaps to solve this is to get a small group of people together who agree upon this and maybe could actually do something about it, as in just on a personal level. It doesn't have to be political in any way. How about a non-political organization like the Free State Project? You can go to freestateproject.org/join. freestateproject.org/join. And you could become a member of it. Ellen, you and I both moved to New Hampshire. I moved about 8 years ago. You moved, 7?
Yeah, 7 years ago.
7 years ago to New Hampshire for the Free State Project to get some of that sweet, sweet personal liberty in our lifetimes. And, I don't know.
And some communion with fellow liberty lovers.
Oh, yeah, because you're going to get that. Hundreds of events going on every year. Events Ellen and I have been to many times. Of course, Pork Fest, Liberty Forum, and so on. I mean, just great times to be had with people who actually might respect your privacy, and also, don't want to steal from you. Taxation is theft. You go down the fucking list, and it's a beautiful thing to just have that little bit of security around you that, hey, these people, they kind of get it, that I just want to be left alone. And the Free State Project New Hampshire alone is a place to do that. But freestateproject.org/join. Check it out, sign up, be one of, originally it was supposed to be 20,000 people, right?
Right, 20,000 signers, which the Free State Project has already surpassed.
Yeah, significantly. I think it's over 24,000 now, and there's already thousands of people here, just waiting to meet you. So, freestateproject.org/join. I guarantee you it will, you can't make guarantees because then it's like, wait a minute, he guaranteed me that it would change my life, but it didn't. No, let's just say it's going to change your life. It changed mine. Ellen, wouldn't you say the same?
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
I met you.
Yeah, same. So check it out, freestateproject.org/join or fsp.org/join, fsp.org/join. Hit that up. If FSP is in Free State Project, fsp.org/join. All right. Let's start getting into this subject, shall we? This is an interesting one to be sure. So let's just say it. Buckminster Fuller. Ellen, are you a fan?
Oh, am I a fan? What a
As
name.
a scientist engineer,
I mean, his name is well known across the scientific community. I mean, even beyond that, I'm sure. I mean, not only for designing the first geodesic dome, but there's a whole class of molecules named after him, which, if you're a molecule enthusiast, you know what I'm talking about.
Like Ellen is. Woo! Fuck, I love that. I love you. Yeah, actually, in New Hampshire, we have the domes, right? Isn't that a thing?
Sure, yeah.
That's part of, some Free State Project participants were in on that. Remember, fsp.org/join. Anyway, so Buckminster Fuller, right. So if you're that kind of, but I mean, his influence I feel like you see everywhere. Like most people kind of know that name, and a lot of people, even these like weird entrepreneurial people who just like to share inspirational quotes, have at some point or another shared quotes from Buckminster Fuller. I mean, this guy really, I mean, very much. Would you compare him to a Nikola Tesla? Would you compare him, like, would you say he's in that line, in that vein?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, clearly he's an inspirational speaker and architect and scientist. I mean, I don't know that anybody could be compared to Tesla, but certainly he was a really great scientific mind. I don't know. How would you answer that question?
Well, I see him as a Tesla in the scope of what he was into. I mean, this guy, I think, was a real polymath. Like he was developing cars, homes. Just, he had thoughts on everything. In fact, there's some audio at the top of the show that I played where he was definitely waxing very philosophical, especially about things like love, that he compared them to be, that it is a force as dynamic and interesting and as integral to the universe as gravity. I mean, this guy had some far out ideas, so I feel like it's kind of in that vein. Certainly, perhaps not at the same level of brilliance as Tesla, because Tesla was like, he just,
He was so beyond his time. So before,
Yeah.
Before his time.
Yeah. I mean, well, and beyond his time. I mean,
Yeah.
like total 0 to 1. I mean, just other level genius. But Buckminster Fuller, I mean, I'd say he's up there with the Asimovs, the Sagans, and all those.
Yeah.
Just a brilliant fucking guy. So I'm a fan as well of all kinds of his work. But something I must have read it in a book somewhere, but I didn't really think about it. And I just kind of like skimmed over it. And I can imagine why a lot of people wouldn't talk about this sort of thing. And that's kind of what I want to bring up here. Now, you and I, Ellen, we're very much into, health and wellness, as they say.
Yeah, always finding ways to improve on that.
Sure. Very much, not to take a term from a company that I think is actually bullshit, but, we're very much into human optimization, right? I mean, we're going to the gym all the time, experimenting with our diet and supplements and all these other things. I mean, we're certainly of that ilk. And sleep is something right now that is a hot topic with a lot of like athletes and a lot of the, like what are the ways to, how much sleep do you need? How much rest? I mean, like all these different things. And I know for me, like in bodybuilding circles, a lot of people are talking in the past couple of years, they're saying, like a guy will get interviewed on a bodybuilding podcast and they'll ask him, so what is the secret? How do you look better than you did in 2017? And he'll say, I sleep a lot more now, and I rest a lot more and I don't like necessarily work out as much, etc. So it's a big thing. Now, there have been a lot of crazy experiments around sleep long before bodybuilders were trying anything out in the modern era. The military, the U.S. Army, was experimenting with 10-hour or 10-day work weeks. And also,
Of course the military would.
Yeah, anything that you got to squeeze out that last bit out of the grunts. That's so crazy. But I mean, these concepts, there's been experimentation done with this over the years. I mean, and over the decade, over the past century, if not more. So it's not necessarily anything new. But I never knew Buckminster Fuller had an interest in experimenting with sleep cycles, shall we say. And he had one, and in fact, I have stories in the show notes if people want to read it. I'm going to read a little bit about it, but I was just absolutely fascinated by this. And I mean, as somebody who also, I have experimented my whole life with different sleep cycles or patterns and schedules, this really intrigued me. But we got to get Ellen's take on this, because when you, to put it simply, you can be an attack dog on a subject, because like you will just, I've said this before on the show, I have what I call Ellen's sword, which is like there's a subject and you start talking about it, the instant, without you even doing any research on the matter, the instant you see a flaw, a chink in the armor of what somebody's saying, I mean, you put a sword through it so fast and so matter of fact, and it's funny because nobody, like, they don't expect it from you because, for a few reasons, but I mean, a lot of people don't come as the complete package that you are, right? Where you are absolutely brilliant, on every level. But then also you're just, you're well, let's say it, you're stunning and you're also but very sweet, and you just have like this, very, very empathetic affect to you. But then, like, if somebody says something that you just know is pure bullshit, I mean, you run that sword through it so fast, and it's amazing to watch. But
well, I have to choose my moments, you know.
yeah, well, you're good at it. You're a master strategist. I mean, you really are. But anyway, so I'm very intrigued to hear what you have to say this. And when you do get to research things, I mean, then you just come at it, and I mean, you know, I've seen you. I mean, hell, you've shut me down many a time where you're just like, yeah, no, like, yep, you got it. You're right. So this will be interesting to get into. But I was intrigued when I read about this, and basically here's the headline: Buckminster Fuller's Dymaxion sleep plan. He slept 2 hours a day for 2 years and felt, quote, vigorous and alert, end quote. So that's his claim. Let me read a little bit about it. One potential drawback of genius, it seems, is restlessness, a mind perpetually on the move. Ellen, would you agree with that? You kind of take a little while to fall asleep, don't you? Because you're just thinking about things.
Yes, and I wouldn't contribute that so much to, like, intelligence, but maybe a habit of overthinking.
Okay.
And ruminating. And those are not things that are helpful, and I think anybody could do that regardless of how intelligent or not intelligent they are.
Sure.
So I suppose maybe there is... It might seem like a drawback to some people that, like, these genius characters have so many ideas and they don't have time to fulfill all of them in their lifetime. But to them, it's probably the most thrilling existence that they could experience.
Right. No, that's fair to say. I mean, reading on with the story, of course, this is what makes many celebrated thinkers and artists so productive. That and the extra hours some gain by sacrificing sleep. Voltaire reportedly drank up to 50 cups of coffee a day and seems to have suffered no particularly ill effects. Wow, that sounds like me. No.
Wait, the key sentence is next.
Balzac did the same and died at 51. Woo.
Exactly. So I think this is a bit of foreshadowing for this whole story, but let's continue.
Sure. All right. So anyway, the caffeine may have had something to do with it. Both Socrates and Samuel Johnson believe that sleep is wasted time, and, quote, so for years has thought gray-haired Richard Buckminster Fuller, futurific inventor of the Dymaxion house, the Dymaxion car, and the Dymaxion globe, end quote, wrote Time magazine in 1943. Engineer and visionary Fuller intended his Dymaxion brand to revolutionize every aspect of human life, or, in the now slightly dated parlance of our obsession with all things hacking, he engineered a series of radical life hacks. Given his views on sleep, that seemingly essential activity also received a Dymaxion upgrade. Anyway, they explain where the word Dymaxion came from, but it's basically just like putting dynamic maximum intention all together into one word. And he would use this as marketing for, like I said, there was the Dymaxion car, there was the Dymaxion house. I mean, he used it for like everything because he just thought it sounded so futuristic and cool. I have to agree. I think it's a great word.
It is, for sure. I want to go back to the part that you were just reading where Socrates and Buckminster Fuller were saying, like, sleep is a waste of time.
Yeah.
So I really take issue with that because forever, for as long as humans have been around, they've always wondered what happens when you sleep. Why do people sleep? It's a mysterious time when you lose consciousness.
Right.
And, like, images and thoughts come to you in really distorted, non-realistic ways. So, like, what's going on during that time? And, I mean, around Buckminster Fuller's time, people were starting to figure out, oh, this is what happens when you sleep. You know, there's REM and non-REM.
Yeah.
And maybe, like, we don't fully understand what happens during that time, but certainly when you're sleeping, your body is resting at the very least, which for people like bodybuilders or people who are doing lots of physical labor, that's super important.
Sure. I mean, that's the tears and the muscle fibers repairing and so on. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And, like, we know for a fact that there are certain people who will actually, like, die when they're deprived of sleep. Like, anybody could die from not sleeping for, like, 4 or 5 days in a row, you know? It's very dangerous. But, I just feel like that's a really flippant sentence to say that, like, it's a total waste of time. Because even if, you know, sleep is getting the Dymaxion treatment, it's still present, you know?
Yeah, and I think that, Well, I have some things to say on this as well, and I guess I'll save them. But I agree with your sentiment that sleep is not a waste of time. In fact, it should be seen as a very beautiful thing. Really, it's interesting that Socrates would say that in ancient Greece when you figure he had all the time in the world to sleep. And not so much distraction. But it's amazing. It appears things don't seem to change, and I wonder what that has to say. I think there's something within that as well.
Well, again, I think we should reference the sentences that were placed next to each other where, Voltaire drank 50 cups of coffee and was fine, but this other guy tried that and died at the age of 54.
Yeah. Well, and there might have been a bit of a divine hand with Voltaire. I think God needed Voltaire to live a really long time so that Voltaire could disprove that God exists. I know that sounds paradoxical, but no. Because Voltaire, well, anyway, oh boy.
So there's a larger point that I want to get to, but I really want to get through the article first before we discuss it.
Yeah, let's do that.
I just wanted to say, sleep is never a waste of time.
No, and I totally agree that we need more, lots more, and we don't get it.
Yes.
But anyway, let's see what Buckminster Fuller had to say on the matter. So Fuller, Time reported, reasoned that man has a primary store of energy quickly replenished and a secondary reserve, or second wind, that takes longer to restore. He hypothesized that we need less sleep, or we would need less sleep if we stopped to take a nap at the first sign of fatigue. Fuller trained himself to do just that, foregoing the typical 8 hours, more or less, most of us get per night. He found, as have many artists and researchers over the years, that after a half-hour nap, he was completely refreshed. Naps every 6 hours allowed him to shrink his total sleep per 24-hour period to 2 hours. Did he, like the 50s mad scientist, become a tragic victim of his own experiment? No danger of merging him with a fly or turning him invisible. The experiment's failure may have meant a day in bed catching up on lost sleep. Instead, Fuller kept it up for 2 full years, 1932 and 1933, and so this is being done in the 30s, and reported feeling in, quote, the most vigorous and alert condition that I have ever enjoyed, end quote. He might have slept 2 hours a day in 30-minute increments indefinitely, Time suggests, but found that his, quote, business associates insisted on sleeping like other men, end quote, and wouldn't adapt to his eccentric schedule, though some not for lack of trying. And anyway, I can personally, Jay Baldwin claims, I can personally attest that many of his younger colleagues and students could not keep up with him. He never seemed to tire. Just this last bit here. A research organization looked into the sleep system and, quote, noted that not everyone was able to train themselves to sleep on command, end quote. Of course, that's a big problem, right? Not everybody can just fall asleep, when they feel fatigued. Because if you lay down, you might start worrying or thinking about other things and worrying about it, right? That's kind of problem one with this.
Yeah, I know from my own experience, it takes me at least half an hour to fall asleep if I'm taking a nap, or even just going to bed at night and not particularly exhausted. But there was a really important quote in the middle of the paragraph that we just skipped, where it was talking about how he could fall asleep so quickly that it almost seemed like he was having a seizure. Like, he could just switch his brain off.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah.
He had trained himself so acutely that he was able to just fall asleep instantly. And that is something that I've noted in certain people in my life throughout time, and I'm totally jealous. I wish I could do that.
Yeah, so that's kind of a key to this, though.
Right.
Yeah.
He's just such a unique person. There's something about him that allows him to fall asleep instantly, whenever he wants to.
Yeah, so maybe that speaks to Fuller, if he really didn't have any... I think there's more to it than this, but basically, for Fuller, if he had such control over his faculties, mental, whatever, that he could just turn it off, and just go to sleep. Maybe this could work for him because of that, but again, I personally, I think there's a little bit more, but let me read a little bit on this, and then we'll talk more about it. Yeah, so anyway, Bucky disconcerted observers. Baldwin writes, by going to sleep in 30 seconds is, there it is about the seizure. Buckminster Fuller was undoubtedly an unusual human, but human all the same. Time reported that, quote, most sleep investigators agree that the first hours of sleep are the soundest, end quote. A Colgate University researcher at the time discovered that, quote, people awakened after 4 hours sleep were just as alert, well-coordinated physically, and resistant to fatigue, end quote, as those who slept the full 8. Of course, at that point, I think it becomes, because I mean, I've certain, so in the military, you're actually only required to get 4.5 hours of sleep per night. And I had plenty of those nights when I was in the Army where, I only got 4 hours of sleep or so, you can be alert when you get up after 4 hours, but then your staying power is a whole other conversation as compared to if you got a full 8.
Yeah, and that has to do with your REM and non-REM cycles. Because after 4 hours, you've completed a full cycle. And then the next 4 hours, you're doing the next cycle. So, like, if you get woken up, 3 hours into your sleep, you haven't completed the full cycle yet. You won't be as alert.
Yeah,
I think that's just what they're proving with
right.
that.
Right. I mean, there is a conversation to have around, because you have, again, full REM sleep and non-REM sleep, or deep sleep and not. And you generally, I think the average person, if they're lucky, gets a couple hours of actual REM sleep out of that 8.
Right.
So, but is REM sleep all you need? I think that's what they're trying to say, is that maybe as long as you get those couple hours of REM sleep, it doesn't matter about the timing of the non-REM sleep isn't that big of a deal. But I think that's got to be up to some kind of debate. I mean, because, again, we still don't totally understand, I think, what the brain is up to while we're sleeping anyway.
No, it's so misunderstood.
Right. Well, let me read a little bit more here. Sleep researchers since the 40s have made a number of other findings about variable sleep schedules among humans, studying shift worker sleep and the so-called biphasic pattern common in cultures with very late bedtimes and siestas in the middle of the day. The success of this sleep rhythm, quote, contradicts the normal idea of a monophasic sleeping schedule, end quote, writes Evan Murray at MIT's Culture Shock, in which all our time asleep is lumped into one block. That's monophasic. Biphasic sleep results in 6 or 7 hours of sleep rather than the 7 to 9 of the monophasic sleepers. Polyphasic sleeping, however, I was going to bring this up too, but polyphasic sleeping, however, the kind pioneered by Fuller, seems to genuinely result in even less needed sleep for many. It's an idea that's only become widespread within roughly the last decade, Murray noted in 2009. He points to the rediscovery, without any clear indebtedness, of Fuller's Dymaxion system by college student Maria Staver, who named her method Uberman in honor of Nietzsche and spread its popularity through a blog and a book. Anyway, so they go on to talk about that. Polyphasic sleep is something that is kind of the same concept as what Fuller did, where like every couple hours or so, or something like that, like you sleep for 20 minutes. It's kind of variable in how you set that up, and I suppose it depends upon the person. But it's very, very similar, and that is something that's kind of popular. I know Steve Gibson, or I'm fairly certain Steve Gibson has said in the past that he tried it, and he says, no, that doesn't work. And Steve Gibson, in my mind, is one of those minds, similar to, I put him right up there with a Buckminster Fuller as far as brilliance goes. And he's somebody who's really into, like, I mean, if you go to the GRC website for Steve Gibson, who hosts the Security Now podcast, my favorite podcast, you'll find where, I mean, he has health tips. He just writes about everything. It's really, really impressive. And he basically called bullshit on this. But anyway, polyphasic sleep, certainly that's a thing that people are practicing. Now, the biphasic sleep, they were looking at cultures in the past, and some maybe still today, where basically you'd sleep for 4 hours, and then in the middle of the night, you'd get up for an hour or two. And then you'd go back to sleep for like 4 more hours, and then you'd get up and go about your day, and then maybe there'd be a siesta in there somewhere.
Well, that's actually been common in even Western cultures
Yes.
over the past few hundred years.
Correct.
Like you have your first sleep and then your second sleep, and somewhere in between you get up and do writing, have a snack.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean there are a lot of cultures too that just like taking a nap in the middle of the day, not necessarily doing both of your sleep cycles lumped together like in the same 10-hour period.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are plenty of cultures around the world that accept that as common.
Right.
But polyphasic is, I guess that's a little more unique because that's like 3 or more times a day you're sleeping.
Yeah.
And I think... So this is what I wanted to say earlier, that I've been thinking this ever since... well, even before I read this article, but this kind of just cemented it for me. I think there are some people that just have really different brains.
Yeah.
You know, like, there are some parts of sleep that we can quantify. There are many more that we have no idea about.
Yeah.
And I think maybe for certain special people, this is a totally acceptable way of living.
Mm-hmm.
But for the majority of humanity, it's not functional.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to bring up. Kind of the individualism argument of this is that, look, everybody's different, so people have different tolerances and what they can handle with sleep or lack of sleep. Just like there's people who absolutely, they operate better at night than they do during the day. And then there's people who operate early in the morning better than they do at night. You know, I mean, we're not... Medicine has a real problem with the one-size-fits-all mentality.
Yeah.
That's a fact of life. I mean, and it's tragic because it leads to a whole lot of problems. But I think you raise a really, really great point on that. That there are some brains who can be aware with this little bit of sleep. And I mean, certainly Buckminster Fuller was operating on another level. You know, go ahead.
And I could never train myself to fall asleep within 30 seconds. I've
Right.
tried. There's no way it's going to happen. But some people, they just have a natural ability to do so.
Well, I'll tell you, I can fall asleep. You drop of a hat. Like I can fall asleep, and more or less I can sleep through anything unless it's. But here's the problem with that. Let me tell you what it took me, and it's not a good thing. What it took me to get to that point. Again, it goes back to the military. Like when you are, you know, just constantly on. And, you know, the adrenaline is constantly running, say in a war zone of any kind or whatever. You learn to sleep in the weirdest positions, in the weirdest places, anywhere. I mean, I've slept on the hottest of rocks. I've literally been in barracks sleeping under bunks, like right underneath a bunk on my back. And I would even, I'll tell you the story, I would even, because like, you know, on the bottom of old beds, how they would have like kind of the chain link that was holding the mattress
it's like
up.
a netting.
So they'd say, well, you guys can't sleep. And I'm like, well, I gotta fucking sleep, you know? So I would get under the bed and pretend that I was making my bed, because, you know, you have to do that to the point where you can, you know, flip the quarter on it and all that. And I'd get under it, make it look like I was making the bed underneath and pulling everything tight I would hook my fingers into the chain link. And I would just sleep on my back like that for like a couple hours and just try to get in more sleep. I absolutely learned, but it was through point of trauma, you know, that I learned to fall asleep at a time. Nobody should have to go through that. You know, like that's one way that'll make it work. But for fuck's sake, no, that's beyond inhuman, to say nothing of, you know, what it means about, you know, sleep. So no one should have to go through that. I mean, just bottom line, you know, to be able to even do that. What else do you have on this? Because, I mean, I certainly have other points to make as well, but that I think that speak to not so much like individual, or the fact that we're all individuals and we're all different, but I mean, you know, what do you have any more on that, or any other thoughts on this?
I just think that this is more evidence that understanding sleep and why we sleep and what happens during sleep, and even like how people fall asleep. Mm-hmm. This is all a science that has largely, like, it's being studied, but there's still so much that has to be answered that we just don't know.
Yeah.
And I really think there's a lot there to be figured out. And maybe there's people with different genotypes that, you know, sleep very differently from other people. It could be a mutation of some kind that allowed him to sleep for 2 hours a day.
Sure. There have been those. In fact, for some reason, I seem to remember a story where a kid never slept. Like basically never slept. I don't know if that...
Wow.
I'll have to look into that, but I think that was... I'm pretty sure that was the thing. Of course, that was decades ago, but it was a problem for the parents, because, like, this kid, you know, from the day he was born, was just always on, you know, and
That's so crazy.
Yeah. So there are those kinds of differences. So, like, having I mean, it sounds like, Ellen, you're basically saying the very concept of a sleep plan is anathema.
Oh, yeah, I don't think there should be a plan. I think you should sleep when you feel like you need to sleep, and sleep for as long as you feel that you need to.
Damn Skippy.
And I know that, like, the way that modern society works, it's hard for people to get as much sleep as they need. because the vast majority of people need 8 hours of sleep. And there are, like, quasi-scientific rules out there that say, like, you know, if you're sleeping 6 hours a night or 10 hours a night, then you're more likely to have heart attacks when you get to the age of, like, 50 or something, because oversleeping and undersleeping both are really dangerous.
Right.
But maybe not to everyone.
Yeah, and some research says there's people who have to sleep 13 hours.
Wow.
I mean, yeah.
That's crazy.
Sure. So, but I mean, you know, they're not going to go polyphasic. You know, they're not going to do the Dymaxion sleep plan. I mean, they're going to die potentially. I mean.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess it's worth experimenting around with, but if you're not adapting to it within a few weeks, that's definitely a sign that you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I get the idea of, like, you're living such an incredible life, or there's so much you want to do or whatever that you don't want to sleep, right?
Yeah, of course, and everyone has experienced that at some point.
Yeah.
They're just so excited about a project and they want to keep working on it, but they know they have to sleep.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I have so many projects that I want to work on. I mean, and Ellen, you know better than anybody.
Yeah.
You know, the amount that I want to do, and, like, I just run out of time. And you've got to stop and allow your creative batteries to recharge. I mean, it's not just even about, like, your energy. Like, there's so many different aspects that just have to recharge. You got to pull away. But I mean, like, so when I was a teenager, I remember, and I've told this story before on the show, but I was reading the Batman, the novelization of the Nightfall comic, which was a really huge comic in the 90s. And in it, you find out that Batman only sleeps 2 hours a week.
A week?
Yeah, that was never in the comic books, or I would have read it. But in that book, like, they described that, and I was like, wow, that's awesome. Like, I got to try that. And I tried. I got to about 50 hours, more or less. And like, I fell over and, like, was salivating uncontrollably. Like you just, like, it was just dripping out of my mouth because, you know, I'm just slack-jawed from, like, the lack of sleep. And I literally slept through an entire day after that.
Well, clearly that wasn't for you.
Yeah, I mean, maybe somebody could say, well, you could train yourself over time, you know, to do a little bit more. You shouldn't have just gone, you know, cold turkey with it, as they say. But no.
Well, you told me that even over the last few years, you've been, like, trying to get less sleep, or out of necessity have had less sleep than you felt you should have because you were working so much. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that, like, I can just feel it. It's not good. And I can pay attention to my body because when you're someone that has, like, spent any time developing your body, you learn you have to listen to it. It forces you to listen to it. But a lot of people don't, unfortunately, and I'm not making fun of anybody. I don't care what people do. I'm just saying that not a lot of people really spend a lot of time working on their body and thus be able to, like, really listen to the differences, to know. And right, and actually, I imagine Buckminster Fuller, I mean, no disrespect to the guy whatsoever, but wasn't exactly a physical specimen.
He was tiny.
Yeah, so, you know, maybe he just, I don't know. I mean, because, I mean, another point to bring up is that there is no such thing as just the mind. It is mind-body. Those words really should never be separated. I understand why we do, but really they are one and the same. And the health of one directly reflects the health and affects the health of the other. And so ultimately, it's just like space-time. They're not two separate things. You know, we talk about them that way sometimes, but they're really not. So, but the point I want to get to with this, and this might speak into our next story, though. Holy shit, we've been going forever here. I don't know if we'll see what we want to do. But I feel like this really is not even remotely possible today. Buckminster Fuller could pull it off in his very distractionless 1930s. But in a world where you just step outside, and especially if you live in a city, and you are inundated with advertisement, billboard, neon light, blah, blah, I mean, or the screens that are just surrounding you fucking everywhere. I mean, one thing I can't stand at the gym, like, fine, I can put on a pair of headphones or even pop in earplugs and hear nothing and not have to deal with listening to, you know, idiots talking, okay, or whatever, or the terrible music being played. But I can't, like, there's just screens everywhere. I can't avoid them. Like, I mean, and they catch your eye. And, like, I don't think our brains could even rest to the level that Buckminster Fuller even dreamed of achieving. You know, because we're just, again, we are so inundated with I mean, this is a popular thing in Silicon Valley, which basically means that there's probably a little bit of truth to it, but the way that they're engaging in it is bullshit, and only people that are ridiculously rich can do it, even though they're telling everybody else that they should, and it turns into a ridiculous cat and mouse, which runs into this whole problem. Sorry. But the idea of like a what do they call it? Like a dopamine vacation? Or something like that. I forget the exact term that they use.
I've never heard of this before.
Or no, it's a dopamine fast. That's what they call it. They say, "Sorry, I'm on a dopamine fast." And you just
What does that mean?
you want to grab the collar of somebody like that talks that way. You know what I mean? And it's like, what did you just say to me? How nice it is for you that you can take a break from getting a dopamine rush, you know, in your life, that you have the ability to just close off the world like that for a week or a month. Basically, they're saying is that they don't want to take in, like they won't watch movies, they won't watch TV shows, they won't watch like the news or anything that would effectively get their blood boiling.
But
give them a dopamine
isn't
rush.
the only, like, watching television or whatever, that, like, yes, like, when you see colorful things on your screen or you see the thumbs up or whatever, you get a little dopamine rush, but those aren't the only things that cause that.
Well, sure, right. But I mean, it's an abstract term that they're using to describe this, of basically getting rid of excitable elements in your life.
Oh, and you're saying that's a privilege that they have.
Oh, it absolutely is. And it's double worse because these same asshats who are saying they're going on a dopamine fast are the ones that put us all up on the dopamine rushes, you know, like they're the ones that created the red notifications on Facebook or, you know, whatever, or created the notifications that pop up and disturb you even when you're trying to do something constructive on your smartphone or on your computer, right? I mean, it's horrible. But we live in, to use their vernacular, I mean, the reason they came up with the concept of a dopamine fast is because they're realizing the very thing that I'm saying. I'm not saying they're wrong. You know, I'm just saying that it's outrageous that they get to do it and they're the ones that created the dopamine overload in the first place. And so we live in a civilization where, like, your brain is, your senses, everything, your mind, body is functioning on turbo all the time. Whether you work out or, you know, it's not even a question of health. It's just what your senses take in. You are overloaded. And so, you know, I don't think it's surprising that now even like, you know, people who are at kind of on the bleeding edge of fitness, where you have like bodybuilders and other people, where they're like, oh yeah, well, I'm sleeping more and my body is repairing itself more. And that's because it's not so much that they're sleeping more. I think it's more that they're spending time not in this, you know, in the distraction age. You know, they're not spending time in our distraction-filled civilization. They're not looking at their smartphone. They're not watching TV. They're not doing whatever. And I think that's a lot more key to this. And I imagine Buckminster Fuller was so busy constantly creating. I mean, maybe this could work for him because he wasn't taking all this crap in, you know?
Yeah, and he probably wasn't going to the gym every day, too.
That's true. So there's another way that he wasn't like really burning himself out or, you know, needing like real energy repair, right? Because again, like we said at the beginning of this, you know, the repair of your muscle, your torn muscle fibers, which is how you build muscle, right? When you're working out, it's how you stay fit. That is a key thing that happens during sleep, and you need a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of body repairs happen while you're sleeping, not just with like torn muscles, but like your skin, your blood, like all sorts of things replenish themselves while you're asleep. Mm-hmm. So it's really important for that body repair, and I'm amazed that he was able to get away with this for it. You know, like, I'm very happy for him that because he's such a brilliant person and has all of these goals and aspirations, that he had that extra time to work on all of his ideas throughout the day.
Sure.
I mean, the saddest part of the story to me was that he said he couldn't keep doing it because it was disturbing to people and they didn't want to help conform to... like, not that anybody's obliged to conform to his sleep schedule, but, like, his sleep schedule wasn't being accepted by those around him.
Right.
Like, they weren't willing to work with him on it.
Yeah, I mean, it does make you wonder. That is sad, but it does make you wonder, would he have died a lot earlier? You know, I mean, he lived a pretty full life, but I mean, would he have died a lot earlier if he kept it going?
I mean, like, if it was really deadly to him... he would have noticed signs long before the full year had passed, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because sleep is that critical. Like, if you were to do that for even, like, a couple weeks and it wasn't right for you, you would know. Like, the effects would build up over time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where this idea of, like, sleep debt comes from. You know, if you don't sleep enough one night, like you sleep 6 hours or something, and you normally sleep 8, then you have to add on another, like, hour or two the next night just to catch up. So, I mean, like, I think the effects would be obvious if it wasn't something that his body-mind could work with, you know, but clearly he could, which is so fascinating, and I would love to know why. I mean, I think everybody would love to know why. Like, what is it about that kind of person that allows them to have that reduced sleep schedule?
Let me ask you this, okay? And I don't know that there's any right or wrong answer necessarily here. And like you were saying about sleep, how we're all different, and we all have different requirements. I mean, that I think is fact, and even medical science has gotten to the point where it just admits to that, even though it has like these average recommendations, right?
Yeah.
But research has been done, and people accept it that it's somewhere between people that need between 6 and 13. Like, you know, in fact, I think I even covered that story on Sovereign Tech some years ago. So maybe everybody's an individual on this, and that's an important thing really to bring up here. And I don't know if we're going to get to our next story, so we might have to have you on again next weekend if you're open to that, Ellen. But it would be playing
we can try.
All right, it'd be playing on a trilogy. But let me ask you this desire of wanting to, like, oh, there's so much more to do. And I understand it. You know, there's video games I want to play. There's stories I want to write. There's podcasts I want to record. I want to, and I have a running rule of creating more than I consume. Like, if I'm not doing that, I'm pissed, you know, like with myself. And so this desire to constantly like do more, there's so much to do, blah, blah, blah. Is there something inherently flawed in that? Like, is that actually like a byproduct, say, of our more modern civilization? I mean, Socrates would kind of put the ixnay on that, but then also he lived in a very developed civilization for its time. Do you think, I guess what I'm asking, this is a very abstract question and very philosophical, frankly, but do you think that people, or maybe it's philosophical, do you think that people, you know, maybe we're not meant to just do that damn much?
Oh, I don't know. This is a really difficult question to answer.
Sure.
Because if there's something that you want, if you really want it, it can't be wrong.
Yeah.
So if you truly intrinsically feel that you have to create all of these things to be happy with yourself, or to feel that you've fulfilled your purpose in life, that you've determined over time, or like you just feel an impulse to create these things, there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't want to overlook the importance of quiet and laziness and restfulness and being centered and, you know, not working all the time. I mean, like, obviously modern civilization has this industrialization mindset where people feel that they have to go to their 9 to 5 and do really well. And, you know, if you have any goals outside of that, you only have a limited time with which to do it. So, of course, you're always feeling pressured to be doing something. And I think that is flawed. But once you take the 9 to 5 job out of the equation, like, you can spend your restful time in a much more, dare I say, productive way.
Yeah, I hear that. And so, in fact, we have a friend, and she said something to me the other day that I thought was, like, the way she said it, it was just very simply and brilliantly put. Said, I hope you have some nothing time this weekend. And nothing time. I was like, yeah, I like that. Nothing time. You know,
how did you take that? Like, how do you interpret that?
Where there's no plan, and you can just, you know, relax and just chill, you know, and like there's no need to be like super productive. That's kind of how I took it.
So you think that you take that as sort of like removing future anxiety from the equation. And like by future anxiety, I mean like feeling anxiety about things that are coming up in the near future.
Yeah, that and yeah, just like what needs to get done for the day. I mean, I think we need to have days where you wake up and there is no plan, and no, you don't have to get shit done. And I feel like people, well, I mean, this is a two-edged sword. This is such a huge conversation.
It really is.
And it actually speaks to the original story we're going to talk about, which is also about Buckminster Fuller's point about, and Bertrand Russell's point about like work and the nature of work and all this. And that's something really worthwhile of discussion. But I mean, you get, like, for me, I'm a guy who, like, even the work I do to make the money and all that, actually across the board, is all creative. And I know there's people who think that that's a beautiful thing. Like, they're like, oh, wow, how wonderful. You get to be creative all day and blah, 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 and write and, or do this and do that. Oh, no. Because there's nothing more tasking, mentally, to having to be, like, just constantly creative, constantly having, okay, how do I write this? Because there is no monkey pushes the button here. There is no, there's so many things that I said this to you recently. It's like, I'd love to just go work on a quarry, so like I don't have to think for a little bit, like that would be so nice to not have to be constantly creative. And I feel like Buckminster Fuller would probably slap me across the face for saying that, because I feel like he's a guy who was constantly creative, But I ask myself, okay, but then is it because there's so many things I want to do outside of all the creativity? Is that what's giving me the anxiousness about being constantly creative? I'm going to give you an analogy here, okay? And this is something kind of new to me that I didn't, like, I think I always kind of knew, but I didn't really know. So I'm a game developer, again, more of that creativity. And I know you love video games, Ellen. You're a big fan.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we go to the arcade, all the time and everything. In fact, at Fun Spot, I mean, one of the largest arcades in the world, I mean, you have all of the classics, and everything, right? And, what's our favorite game there?
Well, my favorite game there is Life Force.
Yeah, that's our favorite game there. I mean, pretty much same. Track and field, maybe I'd put up there, but regardless. Okay, so many elements in these games that have, like, the idea that you have a limited amount of guys. You have points. There's a limited amount of time in the game. The difficulty level is high. All these different little elements that you would think, like, the idea of having lives in a game. Like, like you have 3 or 4 lives and you can get extra 1-ups and, and all this stuff like in a Mario game, right? Those are normal for a game, right?
Sure.
Yeah, they are. But they're normal because it was a way to either create a perception of value out of the game, but it's an artificial value. It's not that the gameplay is tight or that the narrative is great or something like that. It is a way of making it seem like, wow, I spent $50, say if you'd like a console game. I spent $50 in this game, boy, I better get a lot of gameplay out of it. So what do? You up the hardness or you up the difficulty on the game. If you want to get more quarters, if you want to make more money off of the coin-op game at, whatever arcade you go to, you limit the amount of lives that a person has, right? You implement things so that you have to spend more money, right, on the game. And that's business. That's how they do business. But here's the thing. None of that equates to a great game. Those are all artificial barriers implemented into these games with one purpose: not to make a great game, but to make money off of you, or to make more money off of it, and apply that concept. This is how I feel about it. Apply that concept to life, and ask yourself how many things we've implemented that we think are just normal. Like, no, of course, the amount of lives in a game, that's completely normal. It's been that way for decades. That's just how you make a game, right? Try and think of the things in real life, not in a video game, but in real life. What is just put there just to keep you busy, or just to keep you placid, or just to keep you whatever, and it's not actually something intrinsic, or it's not something that actually makes life great. It just creates an artificial barrier to make it seem like this part of life, or this aspect of life or civilization, has meaning and value. You know, and I think when I know that that's not like, wow, how did we get here? How did we get into all of this? But that's why I kind of ask myself about, like, oh, there's so much to do, but how much of that is distraction? How much of that is bullshit? How much of that is something that isn't, you know, in a more directed life, isn't what we'd actually want to do, you know? And how much time would we spend just leisurely relaxing and just thinking about things? Do you have anything to say about that? I know I went on a wild ride that went way out there.
Yeah, I mean, some of what you talked about is in the other article that we were supposed to talk about, which I don't know if you want to get into that or not, but I think it would be a perfect fit for what you just described.
Okay. We'll pull it up. So, yeah, what the hell? Let's do it.
Okay, yeah, because I feel like maybe to some listeners what you said was like a giant diatribe, but this second article is actually like right on point with what you said.
Yeah. So I want to get into that. I mean, something I want to bring up where that concept about video games that I just talked about, where that came from is there's actually somebody I'm a fan of. I know you're a bit of a fan of as well. Angry Video Game Nerd.
Yeah.
I love
He's
James.
so funny.
Yeah, James is amazing. But he has a guy who I more or less like as well, Mike Matei, who's kind of his kind of a co-host, kind of a co-conspirator there. And he came out and said that if you're using the rewind feature, which this is a feature in modern emulators and in, like, if you play on Switch Online or something like that, you play classic video games. If you died, you can hit like ZR and it will rewind the game to the point before you died, and then you can just try again from that point. And so Mike Matei said on Twitter that, you know, if you're using the rewind feature and you beat a game, you didn't really beat the game. Like he's saying that you cheated, basically, because you kept going back and you didn't actually go through the process of, well, you might have lost all your lives if you kept trying. You know, and there's games where I get his point, but then somebody just batted right back at him properly, with no offense to Mike Matei, but batted right back at him and said, you realize all of those things are completely artificial constructs within a game just designed to make money, and it has nothing to do with it being a great game.
And the rewind feature is built into the game. Why not use it?
Well, it is now. It wasn't back in the day when they first came out, right?
Sure.
So, yeah, I mean, and well, anyway, that's where that came from. And it was such a brilliant point, and I was just like, oh, you know, like it said such a big thing about so much. It's like, yeah, exactly. How many things are just put in there, not because it makes anything better, but it's just to make money. I'm not talking planned obsolescence or any of that crap. I'm not talking about that. I mean real shit, you know, that we don't really think about. So anyway, Buckminster Fuller and Bertrand Russell, like you said, Ellen, might have been in this vein. So let's talk about it here. This is another article. Bertrand Russell and Buckminster Fuller on why we should work less and live and learn more. I'll read a little bit of it. So, why must we all work long hours to earn the right to live? Why must only the wealthy have access to leisure, aesthetic pleasure, self-actualization? Everyone seems to have an answer according to their political or theological bent. Our economic boogeyman, so-called trickle-down economics, or Reaganomics, actually predates our 40th president by a few hundred years at least. The notion that we must better ourselves, or simply survive, by toiling to increase the wealth and property of already wealthy men was perhaps first comprehensively articulated in the 18th century doctrine of improvement. In order to justify privatizing common land and forcing the peasantry into jobbing for them, English landlords attempted to show in treatise after treatise that that the peasants were lazy, immoral, and unproductive, and two, they were better off working for others. As a corollary, most argued that landowners should be given the utmost social and political privilege so that their largesse could benefit everyone. So I want to stop on that for a second, because there's a lot of libertarians that listen to us and you know, they're hearing this and it's like, oh, here it is. This is some communist screed or whatever, you know, against capitalism and against work and blah, blah, blah. That's not where I am going with this. That's not why I'm bringing this up. Okay. We're talking about, I mean, engineers love efficiency, right?
Of course.
And the chipping away of non-essentials. that's what I'm talking about here, is the chipping away of non-essentials. You know, the getting at the heart of these things. And let's be clear here, like, to be not devil's advocate, because I kind of agree with what they're saying, even though I wouldn't go as far as probably where they want to go, because they're about to quote Karl Marx, okay, which I wouldn't do. But it's important to understand that the Black Plague made a lot of millionaires, but it made a lot of millionaires because there was so much land left over, and there weren't a lot of people. You know, like, I mean, the whole idea of title and a lot of this stuff became a booming business really only after the Black Plague, and you lost however many nths of, you know, the population in Europe. Okay, so like this notion of, well, you know, those landowners, they worked hard, and, you know, if you just work hard, you can own all this land too, is horseshit. They got it all from a lot of them got it from tragedy. Anyway, the effect of the Black Plague on the European economy and concepts around economics is so underexplored. People really got to check themselves on that. But regardless, we're not going to go there.
There's also that, and then, like, claiming land after warfare. You know, like during feudal ages or whatever.
Oh, sure. Oh, I mean, that's hell yeah. I mean, that's a thing too. I think there's plenty of wars that I think you could basically pin down to being a real estate battle. And literally, and I don't mean just because, like, oh, the Roman Empire must grow. I mean that, you know, it was an excuse to take down historic sites so that you could build more whatever on it, and then get people into rent seeking or something. You know, like
or even just claiming the land is yours so that you can put your peasants there and they can farm the land.
Right. Yeah.
And you can tax them. Right.
There's real problems with a lot of these. What we accept as, oh, you know, the invisible hand of Adam Smith or something like that. It's a lot bigger than that, and how we went from, you know, the Renaissance to here to now is a much different story. I've never read, and I don't care how much I like or give a shit about The Economist, I've never read an economist really cover that stuff in any grand detail. I've never heard one talk about the Black Plague. Never. Because if they did, I think they'd be like, I mean, and I've brought this up on Sovereign Tech in the past, even our concepts of private property and things like this, all of that comes out of the Black Plague, because you never read anything like it before then. I mean, maybe something, but it wasn't where, like, the masses got access to it more so, and everything like that is a product of that, but that's besides the point. So anyway, the scheme, well, see, where do I want to read? Because I don't really want to read the Karl Marx stuff. But anyway, let's see. Well, all right, we'll read it here. In far too many cases, in fact, the work we must do to survive robs us of the ability to live by ruining our health, consuming all our precious time, and degrading our environment. In his essay, Bertrand Russell argued that, quote, there is far too much work done in the world, that immense harm is caused by the belief that work is virtuous, and that what needs to be preached in modern industrial countries is quite different from what has always been preached, end quote. His arguments for laziness, as he called them, begin with definitions of what we mean by work, which might be characterized as the difference between labor and management. Quote, what is work? Work is of two kinds. First, altering the position of matter at or near the Earth's surface relatively to other such matter. Second, telling other people to do so. The first kind is unpleasant and ill paid. The second is pleasant and highly paid. Russell further divides the second category into those who give orders and those who give advice as to what orders should be given. This latter kind of work, he said, is called politics and requires no real knowledge of the subjects as to which advice is given, but only the ability to manipulate, quote, the art of persuasive speaking and writing, i.e. of advertising, end quote. Russell then discusses, quote, a third class of men, end quote, at the top, more respected than either of the classes of the workers, the landowners, who are able to make others pay for the privilege of being allowed to exist and to work. The idleness of landowners, he writes, is only rendered possible by the industry of others. Indeed, their desire for comfortable idleness is historically the source of the whole gospel of work. The last thing they have ever wished is that others should follow their example. Now that hits at something big.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that and who is it, Alexis de Tocqueville, I know in Democracy in America, his book, he talks about this, where he says eventually it's amazing, that because he was in America. This is what, like 17th, 18th century, and he's saying, or 19th century, yeah. Anyway, he's saying, wow, it's amazing the industriousness of America and how anybody can really like make it here. I mean, kind of the early concepts of the American dream and all this. He said, but eventually, I think there's going to be a glass ceiling. They're not going to let, the people that are like doing things now and, large landowners and all this, they're not going to let the other people get to the top. But I think Bertrand Russell is on. Like, why would they want you? In fact, really, this speaks to a lot of things. Like, why would Mark Zuckerberg really want you to be as successful as him? No, he wouldn't want you to be. He doesn't want this. Does Mark Zuckerberg support the existence of Twitter? I guarantee you he doesn't. And a lot of these people who, the wealthiest that we can imagine, Amazon is running many, many businesses right out of business or wanting to subsume them. No, they don't want competition at all. They're not interested in it in the slightest. And these companies get to scales so large that, again, they are countries in themselves, and they can basically have their own internal competition. But then that keeps you, unless you want to go in and play by their rules, from being able to like even dream of having some kind of wealth in life. Do you have any comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree that when you analyze it this way, landowners and like the idea of owning land and charging people for existing on it, it seems kind of ridiculous. But I really do like the point that he was making earlier about how like so much of the work that we do is so that we can earn in the system time for ourselves to relax and enjoy just being alive. But in the process, we're working in dangerous conditions, sometimes, for really long hours or around like dangerous chemicals or something. And that in itself is taking years off of our life, which seems somewhat antithetical to the whole concept of living a long and healthy life.
Well, see, now this gets to my point earlier at the idea of, is there something inherently flawed with that desire to constantly do more? Because in so doing, like, to do more, guess what, Jack? You got to work more. And you've got to make more money. And
that's just in this current system, though.
Right, yes, yeah. But like that need, I mean, is constantly, in fact, I love it. I fucking love that Bertrand Russell brought up advertising. Because look, I have advertisers, and they are supporting a very independent voice, and it's great, but we do things in as ethical a fashion of advertising as possible. I will not beat you over the head with this stuff, and it's legit, no scams.
It was so funny what he said about politicians, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like giving advice on what orders should be given, even if they don't know anything about the topic that they're talking about. Right.
It comes down to cleverness, like it's the class of cleverness.
Just being a master of communication and cajoling people.
Yeah. I want to read a little bit more here. But I'm gonna say a phrase so you can help me remember it, because I don't know if we're gonna get to the Waterworld review. We might have to do that somewhere else. But Waterworld has a great phrase in it, and it's the Church of Eternal Growth, and I love that to death. And I want to talk about that. But anyway, let's keep reading here. And because actually, I just said Church of Eternal Growth. What's our next line? The gospel of work, Russell outlines, is, he writes, the morality of the slave state and the kinds of murderous toil that developed under its rule, actual chattel slavery, 15-hour workdays and abominable conditions, child labor, has been disastrous. Work looks very different today than it did even in Russell's time, but even in modernity, when labor movements had managed to gather some increasingly precarious amount of Social Security and leisure time for working people, the amount of work forced upon the majority of us is unnecessary for human thriving and, in fact, counter to it. The result of a still successful capitalist propaganda campaign, anyway, there he goes. If we aren't laboring for wages to increase the profits of others, the logic still dictates we will fall to sloth and vice and fail to earn our keep. Quote, Satan finds some mischief for idle hands to do, end quote, goes the Protestant proverb Russell quotes at the beginning of his essay. On the contrary, he concludes, quote, in a world where there is no one compelled to work more than 4 hours a day, every person possessed of scientific curiosity will be able to indulge in it, and every painter painter will be able to paint without starving, however excellent his pictures may be. Young writers will not be obliged to draw attention to themselves by sensational potboilers with a view to acquiring the economic independence for monumental works for which, when the time at last comes, they will have lost the taste and capacity. The less, end quote, the less we are forced to labor, the more we can do work in our idleness, and we can all labor less, Russell argues, because, quote, modern methods of production have given us the possibility of ease and security for all, end quote, instead of, quote, overwork for some and starvation for others, end quote. So that's what Russell has to say on it. Then it goes into what Buckminster Fuller had to say, which basically echoed much of what Bertrand Russell said. I've brought this example up many times on the show as well. I hear what Bertrand Russell is saying. Like, wait a minute. We have all this automation, and you know, this article gets into UBI, into Universal Basic Income. I'm not supportive of that. I don't even. That's not even I've already had that conversation many times on the show. I have no interest in that. I am not going there. Don't think I'm supportive of that with this. No, there's so much automation and certainly without needing Silicon Valley's algorithms. There's really no reason, like, in my opinion, why we work so much. Like, why we have to keep working. And in fact, I mean, just in the home, you know, and this is the example I bring up often. People have dishwashers, right?
I love our dishwasher.
Yeah, but since the dishwasher came out, since the washing machine and dryer came out, since go down the list of the modern home appliance that's supposed to save so much time, it's damned odd to me that everybody seems a lot more busy than they were 100 years ago. And that's a problem. So, like, what's going on there? We're getting these technologies that are supposed to give us more time, and that's how they sell it to you, right? I mean, you can watch with the dishwasher, watch the old commercials for this, and oh, your wife finally gets to put her feet up for once, and you know, oh, and you get to be there with family, with the kids or whatever. Of course, then they show them all watching TV, but you know, whatever. Like, you're going to have more time in your life to do this. No, that's not what's happening. People are. I don't know what the fuck they're doing, you know? Like, nobody has more time with all of these conveniences that were supposed to give us more time. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, it seems kind of like what free time was gained at that point has now been, like, things have adjusted so that, like, that time that should have been spent at home relaxing is now being spent at work. People are working harder, longer hours, and they're not being paid as much as they have been over the past few decades. Mm-hmm. I don't want to compare it to industrial era because that was entirely different.
Sure.
I mean, people were working like really grueling hours then.
That was insane.
Yeah.
And we literally had businesses hiring armies to, like, shoot
right.
their fucking employees, you know.
When they held a strike because they didn't want to work 12 hours a day.
Yeah, exactly. Looking at you, Carnegie. Anyway, go yeah.
Well, anyway, just it seems a little conspiratorial. And I think you've kind of been hinting at this throughout the episode, but, you know, like, landowners don't want other people becoming landowners. Business owners don't want other people becoming business owners.
Right.
There's an elite class that seems to keep raising the standard for how much time you have to work in order to earn your keep, so that you don't have the opportunity to succeed as much as they did.
Yeah. Now, there's 2 points I want to hit on this, because there is an oddity in that I think is worthwhile to bring up. But also, this concern that if, like Bertrand Russell brought up, that, you know, Satan, whatever, you know,
Satan
idle hands are tools for Satan. Yeah. The idea that if people don't work, that we can't, basically it's saying if people don't work, we can't keep them under control. We can't keep them under wraps.
Right.
That's accurate. But then that's also not bad. And I think that's ultimately what scares the fuck out of a lot of these people, is that if you gave people free time, if they had the time to think and so on, they'd realize that there's shall we say, a lot of higher management and middle management that just ain't necessary in the world. And you know, that's looking at government, that's looking at a whole bunch of different classes of civilization, okay, that just absolutely are not necessary. And again, I mean, I've been saying this for a while on the show. I think that government, corporations, again, that corporatism is actively engaged in making sure you are not happy. Because if you're happy, you might be content with what you've got. And if you're content with what you've got, guess who's not making money? Guess who's not, doing well at the Church of Eternal Growth? Like we know who's not doing well. We know who's not, making bank and whatever. And who the fuck knows why they want what they want? It's damned odd, if you ask me. So the second point I want to bring up on that. So I do think I get conspiratorial about this. I'm not saying that we're even the most, here's an example. A guy who gets labeled as a utopian socialist, Charles Fourier, philosopher from the 19th century. He's a socialist. Even he didn't say that, and he was very utopian. He thought so far that in the future humans are going to grow tails and we're going to have like 3 eyes and all this wacky shit. This guy had the wackiest of ideas. The one thing he said is like, oh no, we're still going to have to work. We're not going to have to work as much, but we're still going to have to work, a little bit, and there's going to be toilets to clean, this kind of thing. So even the most ardent utopian, like I would say Fourier was, didn't kid himself that there isn't some toiling to do that we might not like, But then doing some toiling we might not like for, say, 4 hours a day, 4 days a week, or 5 days a week or something is wholly different than what the fuck we're doing to ourselves right now. That sounds like goddamn paradise, I can only imagine the things I could get done if I, work less, in certain avenues. So the other part of this, though, there are people out there who, and I can think of one in particular, who I consider a friend, and he basically sold his business. Like, he did very well in his business, and he ended up selling it, and did very well through that. He has spent his life after doing that giving people, like, financial advice, getting them into entrepreneurship, trying to show them how to make things, how to improve their lives, and get out of the, basically really get out of the 9 to 5, and get out of this whole workload. There are those kinds of people who I think are, I think they're benevolent, and I think that they genuinely, but the funny thing is these people would totally call themselves capitalists. They would love capitalism. They love automation. They love all this stuff. But even they're saying, their argument is okay, save your money and do this, blah, blah, blah. So you can get into the so you only have to work 4 hours a day, or so you only have to work such and so much. Like, they're trying to free you from this whole thing too. The workload and schedule and half the crap that we do is so ridiculous. And again, I think it's pure fluff, unnecessary, unproductive even ultimately. And it's just it's like homework for kids. Where it's like, come on, you taught me that in class. This is just busy work so that mom and dad don't have to fucking deal with me or something like that, or I don't know, every kid kind of knows that, how much homework is often busy work. Not always, but often enough it is. But what do you got, Ellen?
Oh, yeah, I'd much rather spend 4 hours a day, like, toiling in the garden or cleaning the toilets even.
Yeah.
If I could have the rest of my... And, like, those are activities that are contributing to an overall health and wellness lifestyle.
Right. Has a point.
Yeah, I'm a very clean person. I love it when things are clean and organized. I'm also a healthy person. I would love to have my own garden, even if I had to weed it and, like, till the soil. To have fresh fruits and vegetables, that would be so worth it to me.
Yeah.
And those are just activities that you do to sustain living. And, they're essential. It's essential work. And I would be happy to do that.
Yeah.
If that meant that the rest of my time could be spent, like painting or writing or, building stuff, whatever it was. If I was deciding my own path, I would be totally happy doing that amount of work. But, like, the way that things are set up now, you get a job doing, IT or, being a line operator at a factory or something. Those are completely removed from essential activities of supporting life, or even from your own goals and dreams. And it seems like so much of society is just, like, so much of people's lives are spent now, like, doing things that aren't connected to either of those very important activities.
Right.
And supposedly, like, in your free time, you're supposed to be able to do all that. But, like, people aren't utilizing their free time as well as they could be because, you know, they're just preparing for the next round of work, or they're just so tired that they don't have the mental energy to do the creative stuff like you were talking about, like with your work.
Yeah. They just collapse. They're
right.
just like, I just have to stop, you know?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really a radical way of thinking to try and imagine, you know, this life of it almost seems like luxury, you know, living in a way that's separated from industry and from corporations and from government, and just doing your own thing.
Yeah.
And I don't know that everyone would like that lifestyle, but it sounds really great to me, and apparently it did to Bertrand Russell too.
Yeah. I mean, and I think there's a lot of people who might say something to the effect of, well, you know, though, okay, fine. Like, should people be able to have more hours in the day to go doing whatever the fuck they want? But, you know, a lot of people are stupid, which I don't disagree with that sentiment. Okay. But then I also wonder, on the flip side of that, like saying that they would just do meaningless things or cause trouble or whatever. Part of the problem here, an intrinsic issue within the way the system is right now, is that it is saying, again, because like Bertrand Russell laid out how there's these different classes of people. Again, we're not talking about Karl Marx here, folks. Get over that. Okay. He's saying like there's these different classes, right? There's the politicians, basically the landowners, the managers,
politicians,
blah, 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 right?
landowners, managers.
There is an inherent, is what I want to say. There is an inherent concept that is very subconscious, I think, within that framework. That is, someone's time is more important than your time. And because you are taught to value someone else's time as more important than your own, I think that's one of the things that leads you to perhaps not doing the most, for you, intrinsically motivating and beautiful things that would allow you to have a beautiful life. Because you're constantly even thinking that your time isn't even as important as someone else's. And that's really tragic. But I think most people, they feel it. It's one of those things that they know that there's something wrong with the world, and that's one of them, and they can't put a dot on it. But I really think that that's going on for a lot of people.
Yeah, and some people even end up feeling resentful without completely outlining why it is that they feel that way. Mm-hmm. But that really does take away from your sense of self-worth when you're being paid like $12 an hour, but your supervisor's getting twice as much.
Yeah. I mean, and look, if people have more time, look, not everybody's Da Vinci. Nobody else is Tesla, like we were saying. Not everybody's Bertrand Russell or Buckminster Fuller, you know, these other people. Sure, fine. They might not go out there and make the greatest pieces of art, or they might not go out there and make, you know, domes and whatever else, or invent a new car or new styles of sleep. They might not do all that stuff. But so what? Like, we don't have to. I mean...
Yeah, a human being, like every human being has an intrinsic value.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's unique as an individual. We all are important. Why shouldn't we all be privy to the same sense of feeling, you know, like we deserve to live?
Yeah. You know, quick, let's go to one of the Buckminster Fuller quotes here, because he really raises a great point on this. And we'll read it here. Actually, I'll let's see. A few decades later, I'll start with this. A few decades later, visionary architect, inventor, and theorist Buckminster Fuller would make exactly the same argument to Bertrand Russell in similar terms against the, quote, specious notion that everybody has to earn a living, end quote. Fuller articulated his ideas on work and non-work throughout his long career. He put them most succinctly in a 1970 New York magazine. It was entitled Environmental Teach-In. Here we go. Quote, "It is a fact today that 1 in 10,000 of us can make a technological breakthrough capable of supporting all the rest. We keep inventing jobs because of this false idea that everybody has to be employed at some kind of drudgery because, according to Malthusian Darwinian theory, he must justify his right to exist. Many people are paid very little to do backbreaking labor. Many others paid quite a lot to do very little. The creation of surplus jobs leads to redundancy, inefficiency, and the bureaucratic waste we hear so many politicians rail against. We have, quote, we have inspectors and people making instruments for inspectors to inspect inspectors, end quote, all to satisfy a dubious moral imperative and to make a small number of rich people even richer. We could read on because Fuller has another quote here. What should we do instead? We should continue our education and do what we please. Fuller argues, quote, the true business of people should be to go back to school and think about whatever it was they were thinking about before somebody came along and told them they had to earn a living, end quote. We should all, in other words, work for ourselves, performing the kind of labor we deem necessary for our quality of life and our social arrangements, rather than the kinds of labor dictated to us by governments, landowners, and corporate executives. I mean, how do you feel about this?
I mean, I feel like he was really onto something when he said that the way that things are now, everybody seems to have to justify the right to exist.
Yeah, right.
When, I mean, maybe there, in some sense, you have to, like, earn your living. Like, you have to feed yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to make sure you have enough air to breathe.
Right.
But other than that, I mean, you don't have to justify your existence.
Yeah.
I mean, whether people want you or not, here you are.
Right. Yeah.
You're not going anywhere.
Yeah, you're a human being. I mean,
right.
your life has value from that alone. And it really does, folks. I think we ignore that. But anyway,
yeah,
continue.
and you're capable of doing things not just for yourself, but for other people. And, you know, people are capable, like he said, of making really great breakthroughs that support other people, or even just of doing common tasks that support other people.
Sure.
You know, somebody might be born that it is, like, physically incapacitated. They can't do certain things for themselves. There are plenty of people willing to help take care of those people.
Absolutely, yes.
And there's nobody saying that they need to justify their existence.
Yeah, and this really gets to a big deal here. Again, I mean, you have, you know, when it comes to government, and look, ultimately, I understand the government is in many ways the ultimate problem here. Granted, parents also have some, I mean, there's traumas that get tossed around, you know, throughout civilization. So
yeah.
It's tough to just pin one thing, but government certainly is a huge issue here, no doubt. But this idea of that there are people, I mean, there are people who have different capabilities and maybe better, like, you know, I'm never going to be Tony Hawk. I can't skateboard like that. I'm not going to. I'm not even going to try. All right. In a way, Tony Hawk's better than me. But does his life have more value than mine? No, absolutely not. You know, I mean, like, we're human beings. Our lives have value. And, I mean, this speaks to, well, this is the issue with militaries and all these things, is that there is a lie in civilization that some people just have to die, you know, and like some people just have to go or whatever for the greater good or something like this. And this runs into, this is a huge subject we're not going to get into here. This runs into so many problems when you create this good evil dichotomy, which is also comes out of that Puritan work ethic, I think, which is part of this. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you don't, you know, Bill Gates doesn't laugh at somebody who works at McDonald's, and I don't think he does. You know, he's famously quoted as saying, you know, my parents called working at McDonald's opportunity, right? It's not a joke. But then how many people look down at, you know, working at McDonald's, right? Or whatever. I mean, yeah, you don't have to justify your right to exist, and it doesn't have to be based upon the amount of labor that you put out there. Not at all. And I think that's a really, really solid point. I mean, what else do you have on this?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like there's so much more to a person's value than, like, what they can contribute to the higher-ups.
Sure.
You know, like, maybe a person's value does lie in their artistic ability.
Mm-hmm.
But, even deeper than that, there's an intrinsic value, which is, you know, their individual humanity. I guess we're kind of just discussing, like, what it is they can contribute to other people.
Yeah.
And I guess this kind of plays into what we were talking about earlier with, like, Neil Peart. No one's gonna drum like him.
No one's gonna be Neil Peart. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, he was totally unique because of that, and added so much to people's lives just in the sheer amount of joy that he generated from his music. And, maybe that's not something that, like, would contribute to his survival, but it's something that he clearly enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
And it made other people happy, and it made him happy. So, like, what more is there to say about that? Like, he should, like, it doesn't, I don't think that there's a dollar sign that you can contribute to that.
Right.
You know, I think people would be happy to have him around and to support his living, even if money wasn't part of the equation.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that everybody has something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Where they're just, you're so happy that they're around and it's not something that has a monetary value.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very salient point to bring up. And we don't think about that. And it gets worse because you have so many people that treat human interactions as transactions. They're interactions. They are not transactions. You have so many people who treat, I give you X, and so you give me this, right? I mean, how many people have we heard in our own circles, that talk about love, that talk about relationships like it's an economic concept?
Yeah, that's the fastest way to make it unromantic and unsexy.
Yeah. I mean, it's the easiest way for me to, walk away. Like, okay, well, you're fucking insane. And that's it, is that, like, again, and that's more of that attitude of, oh no, we have to apply a dollar sign to it, otherwise it has no value. And I mean, you're just playing into this whole problem that we're describing here when you do that. People have a right to exist on their humanity alone. I mean, if you're somebody who's into rights theory, they have rights because of their humanity. So what the fuck does that have to do with them going to work? Like that doesn't even make sense. So you only have rights if you work for a living? Like what, where, in what world does that make any sense? Of course it doesn't. No one would I would hope that no one would argue for that, and yeah, it's all very twisted.
Yeah, I really do think that money twists people's innate emotions in that sense. Like, if you're like an average income person and you're walking down the street and you see like a starving homeless person, what sort of a human would you be if you didn't feel some sort of compassion for that person and want to help them? Yeah. And take some sort of action to help them. Right. I mean, you have to be really cold to ignore that sort of plea. And in a sense, like, it's the money that's convincing people that, like, the homeless person doesn't deserve an existence, but the person with the average income does. Like, that's essentially what these economic levels of society are saying to you. Like, some people are less deserving of food or of shelter than others. And I'm not saying universal income either. Right. I'm just saying, like, if you see someone who's starving, who are you not to help them? Yeah, I mean, it's neo-feudalism, it's serfdom. I mean, straight up. And you shouldn't be expecting anything in return for that. I mean, just the fact that someone is still alive because of you, I mean, that's everything. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is what, philosophically, I think these are the dangers we run into when, in egoism, the individual is the measure of all things. Okay, the individual, not money. The individual is the measure of all things. But I think for most other isms, it is not that way. Most other isms, it falls under completely different. It falls under, like, abilities, production, money, all this other stuff. And I mean, that's where we run into trouble. When we start to put value on someone outside of, or if it's not as an add-on, but as in the only value we have in people is on how much they make or how much they produce or how much blah, blah, blah. Like, if that's all that we count that on, I mean, and when we don't accept that, note, they're an individual, so they have value from that. That again, we run into all kinds of trouble. I mean, here, look, I'm going to call it, and if you want me to edit it out, I'll edit it for you. Okay. But like in my day, all I want to do is just fucking like read and fuck. Like, I mean, yeah, I want to make stuff too. I enjoy doing that, like applying what I've read, but I don't have a whole lot of desires as far as like what I necessarily want to do. And I think most people, especially if you were teaching them, and this is a key part too, teaching them what they really want, not what you want them to buy, what they actually want inside, which you can't often sell, okay? That's fine. Like, most people don't want all the crazy shit that
What were you telling me about the other day? Fucking Lady Gaga. What was she doing with that dress?
She was at the Met or something like that, and she was working with designers for like weeks and months to design this dress. It was like 4 layers of dresses, and the very top one was like 40 yards of silk. And then, like, the next one beneath it was, like, really fabulous and amazing. Like, she
had 7 people carrying it behind her.
Yeah, exactly. It was just so much, like, money and time and resources just devoted to looking amazing.
For a photo op.
So that people could take pictures of her.
Yeah, for a photo op.
And people were going nuts. They were acting like monkeys at the zoo, They're like,
oh, look at this, oh!
They're like, Gaga, come over here. Like, everybody wants to get their prime picture of Lady Gaga.
I mean, look, hey, I like her music, and people can do, like I said, people can do what they want to do. But
sure, it's very artistic.
But
I get
what
it.
the fuck? Like... Really, is this what we're like trying to achieve in our lives? Like what the hell? I'm sorry. I don't think if you got to like a very honest Lady Gaga, okay, at a point before the music industry and civilization, whatever else, like hammered down on her, I'm pretty sure that's not what she would have been interested in doing, and like going through that whole mess.
Yeah,
just a
it
guess.
seems like she's like at this point, like once you get to that level of fame, you almost become like an object for sale. Like people take pictures of you and those can be sold for thousands of dollars. So you are a highly valuable commodity.
Right.
And that in itself, I think, is just so fucked up. But then you also have to wonder, like, how does she rationalize spending so much money on that kind of stuff when you know that there are, like, so many people living below the poverty line?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And then that speaks to another thing too, and I say this all the time. The most important philosophical question most important question anybody can ask themselves, because we're all individuals, like we've been saying this whole episode, through varying subjects. Okay, the most important thing you can ask yourself is, what do you want? And 19 out of 20 people, I don't think, can even answer that question, and I might be being generous. They cannot really answer that question. They can say, oh, well, I want to have parties and I want to have this person over and, and do this with the... It's like, whoa. No. What do you want to do? For you. What do you want to do? And
yeah, because once you reach that level of fame and popularity, that's not ultimately for you. Like,
no.
You're so easy to be taken advantage of by other people.
Yeah. I think, and believe me, I've asked this question to people, and I've tried to get them and I'm being kind, and I'm doing it out of absolute care, and I've had people cry right in front of me because I keep asking them, no, what do you want? No, forget about that person. What do you want? And they break down into tears because, A, no one's ever even given them the permission to ask that question, but B, it's so sad, they have never thought about it because they're so busy just worrying about everything else. And when that's the only thing that fucking matters. And I would argue that if you could get people down, get them to that base layer, okay, and get them to answer that question, I don't think we want a whole hell of a lot. And I don't think actually that we probably don't even need a whole lot of money to by comparison, to do what we actually want to do. Yeah, I mean, because I think most people, if you actually got down to it, it's like, well, I just want love. I want somebody to just love me.
And love don't cost a thing.
No, there you go, J-Lo. My love don't cost a thing, and but yeah, like, but you can't sell that, and so nobody tells you that. All this distraction, all these screens that could be telling you the message. In fact, fuck, these screens are making it cheap. They're giving you Tinder. They're giving you Grindr. They're giving you, I understand the importance of Grindr. That's a little different. But, like, they're giving you all these things where, they're like trying to make you feel like you're going to find love with this sort of thing or something like that. When it's all superficial, and it's all, like, it's making the concepts themselves superficial, and it keeps you from actually, like, really thinking about it. That's a whole other thing. Yeah, that's the problem. What we really want deep down inside maybe doesn't cost a goddamn thing. And guess what? If that's all we wanted, or if we realize that's what we really wanted, not all we wanted, because people can want whatever they want, but that's what we really wanted, the Church of Eternal Growth would fall. It would fall apart because they can't sell you anything anymore. And you would be happy, and you would be content. And that is antithetical to what they see as this endless fucking growth. And what a shame. Because how many brilliant people did we miss because they didn't have time to write down that amazing thought that they had? How many people didn't really get to be happy? How many people died so fucking angry because they never did the things they wanted to do and so on? And either because they didn't have the time or they felt like they needed permission and they didn't get it.
Or even the opposite. How many people have died throughout time being completely content with their life, so happy that they lived a beautiful, wonderful, loving, peaceful life.
Mm-hmm.
And their story has never been spread to people because it's not notable enough.
Ah, yes.
That's not something that's going to trend on Twitter.
Yes. It's not going to trend on the internet. This is a huge problem with the internet. That you and I have talked about with the whole Raylo bullshit, but that we talked about often is that and we know this, the internet is not conducive, or certainly social media does not hold up, does not edify rationality. It wants the crazy on whatever side of the spectrum. It does not want rationality at all, because rationality doesn't sell, doesn't get clicks, doesn't get eyeballs, nobody cares. I did an episode a few months ago in 2019 called Live in Obscurity, where I talked about this very thing. You know, that there are people who have lived absolutely fucking amazing lives and you're never going to hear about them. Why? Because they did it right. You know, like you actually shouldn't hear about it. Because they did it right. They went off into the woods, nobody to bother them, and they would wave their freak flag or whatever the fuck that they do, you know, and they are just having the time of their lives, and we don't know about it. And good. You know, I mean, like it's sad at the same time, because it'd be so nice. Wouldn't it be so nice to have a book of, like, holy shit, look at all these amazing people who did this, you know, and lived that special life. But then that's the other part too. If you actually put that book out there, the house of cards would come down. You know, again, that Church of Eternal Growth would be like, wait, this person was really happy when they died? Oh shit, and that's all they did? Oh, I want that. Well, guess what? Money doesn't buy that. And that's a problem. So like you said, money isn't everything.
No, it's certainly not. It's enough to help you survive if you want to live this life, you know, surrounded by people and grocery stores and coffee shops and Walmarts. But it's not I think this article goes on to say later, and I really like this line, like, you can make a living, but you're not actually, that's not giving you more life. It's not living the life. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I like that. You know, maybe we should flip that on its head. It's, you know, like when are you making a death or something like that, or are you know it's somehow use a different term, like the concept of making a living, you know, and all this. I mean, I get it, and you know, we can have all the respect in the world for people that, you know, come out of nothing, and I mean, Ellen, like what you have done with your life is nothing less than remarkable, you know, and where you've gotten and where you're going. I mean, is phenomenal, and we can respect that and all of these things. But at the same time, like, we don't hear about them. That's so brilliant that you brought that up. We don't hear about them. Like, boy, it'd be so great to venerate the people that, you know, that just we never know. The success stories, not monetary success, not zeros in the bank account success. The success of dying happy. We never, ever hear that. And amazingly, I bet a lot of those were not the hardest of lives. You know? I don't know. Oh, boy. Well, so, yeah, anything else you want to add in on this one, Ellen?
Yeah, I mean, I've always said that, like, success is something that's personally determined.
Yep.
You know, whatever success out in the world exists, like climbing the ladder, that's not what makes people happy.
Yeah.
I mean, you could ask plenty of people from all different levels of society what their level of happiness is in these various areas, and people who are impoverished generally are just about as happy as people who are making $50,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Beyond that point, it gets a little bit easier for people. You know, you don't have to worry so much about, like, living week to week and saving up and being able to sustain yourself if something bad happens, which is a very real concern, and I understand why people have it.
Yeah.
Especially if you're living impoverished and, like, the weekly paycheck is really all that you have to go on.
Yeah.
And if you have children, like, that can be really expensive. But I feel like there's so many other areas of success that are determined by what you want and how much you have achieved your goals. And there are 1,000 different ways that you can reach that point. And I don't think that the way that society prescribes it to everyone is the best way. It's certainly not an efficient way.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even a good way. And, like, so many people are criticized for wanting to step back from society and go off the grid, and people see that as bizarre, but that's how humans have lived forever.
Yeah.
I mean,
nobody knows.
Even to this day, there are civilizations that live in total obscurity, like in places in Africa or South America, and they are so happy. Or at least, before big oil companies came in, or like, diamond factories or whatever, and basically enslaved people and forced them to move off their traditional homelands. But, it really doesn't take that much, like you were saying, to be happy. And the harder you work to make it in civilization, the harder it's going to be for you to achieve your own levels of success.
Yeah, because you're going to have to be pleasing other people hardcore and not paying attention to yourself. And what a shame. Yeah, well, I love the point you brought up about living in obscurity. Like that's really what you're getting at. That the happiest people that have ever lived on Earth will never know. In my opinion, we'll never know who they are.
Yeah, and if you're working all the time for somebody else's success, you're not working for your own. It's just taking away from your time in life.
Yeah. Yeah, so, I think to kind of close this out, I think it's good for people to walk away, and I'm challenging you. Answer the question. What do you want? Like, you alone, you're in your free time, whatever, what do you really want? And I'm curious in fact, if you want to email me with them, feel free. But I'm curious what the answers would be to that and how simple the things probably are. And a lot of it probably has to do with senses, like a sense of belonging, a sense of understanding. A lot of these things more than it has to do with an actual physical object of any kind. So I'd really, I'd challenge people to look into that and then, see how you feel and maybe, who knows how much it'll make you question. And think about that video game analogy too. I think that's a big one. So anyway, we've been going over 2 hours. So I think we'll have to save the Waterworld review for another episode. But of course, you're always welcome on. And if you let me have my way, I'm going to have you on every week. But regardless, we'll get into that in a future episode. I think that's worthwhile to talk about. Maybe we'll do it for Zomia 1 content. Go to zomia1.com to get your hookup on that. And of course, if you want to talk about a lot of this stuff, a great place to do that is go to Free Talk Live. freetalklive.com, that's the website. They are a sponsor of Sovryn Tech. I'm honored by that. They are based out of New Hampshire as well, just like us, just like the fsp.org/join, just like the Free State Project. So please visit our sponsors, check it out. And believe me, you're not going to be disappointed when you go and listen to Free Talk Live. And then, of course, head over to zomia1.com and you can find thousands of hours of content. Just become a part of the underground, and you've got so much to listen to. Go for it. And there's plenty to listen to just in what's out there in the open as far as Zomia 1 goes. So anyway, that'll be it for this episode. Ellen, thank you so much for being on. Your insights are always fucking brilliant. That's why I've wanted you on this show for years, and regularly, or just often, right?
Yeah, thank you. I'm so honored.
Yeah, and I just love getting to have you on. And of course, it's just great to spend our lives together. So anyway, so that'll be it for this episode. We will see all of you on the other side.
Thank you for listening to Sovryn Tech, an Osiris One production. Now go out there and make some trouble.
Testing, 1, 2. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I was so excited. I was clapping.
You're slapping those hot legs. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
They're hot in more ways than one right now.
Woo! Woo!
Gotta fan them out.
Okay, I think that actually looks good.
Great.
All right.
Les joies de vivre.